Good evening and welcome to the 2018 Shakopee School Board Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. Tonight we are gathered at Shakopee campus of River Valley Church. My name is Rob O'Neill. I'm the pastor of Resonate Community Church, a member of the Chamber, and I'll be serving as moderator this evening. All of our candidates for Shakopee School Board were invited to participate in tonight's forum. With us this evening are Mr. Joe Aldrich, Mr. Paul Christensen, Ms. Lori Fugate, Mr. Alexander Laminen, Ms. Christy Lewis, Mr. Ivan Pandian, Ms. Christy Peterson, and Mrs. Judith Tomzik. Ed Schwazdell was invited but is unable to attend this evening, and Ms. Deborah Majasic is not with us either. Would you give our candidates a round of applause, please, to welcome them? Candidates are arranged tonight in alphabetical order. Candidates have already recorded video interviews to introduce themselves to the community, and you can view those online. So our candidates are not making opening statements this evening. I encourage you to watch their videos. Tonight, instead, the candidates will be asked a series of questions. They'll have 30 seconds to respond to each question unless noted otherwise. In fact, our first question will begin this evening with a 60-second answer. And candidates, that question is, what have you done in the past to positively impact the students of Shakopee? This will be a 60-second response. What have you done in the past to positively impact the students of Shakopee? And Mr. Aldrich will begin with you.
It's a really good question. What have I done in the past? I have been a coach in soccer for many of the students that have came through the Shakopee doors over the last 7-8 years. I started in 2009 to 2013. I also helped teach a religion class for 3 years at Saks. And with those two, it's given me the opportunity to work closely with students. I also actually helped teach a class at Red Oak in 2009, 2010, not help teach, I was a math tutor. But by being with the students, just one-on-one, 8 to 1 with coaching, it just gave me that sense that, oh, I'm done. It just was a great experience.
Mr. Christensen, what have you done in the past to positively impact the students of Shakopee? You'll have 60 seconds.
Some of the things that I have done has been to volunteer with the Shakopee Hockey Association as a team manager, which also entails serving as a locker room monitor to ensure that everyone has a safe and fun experience in hockey. I've also volunteered at Eagle Creek Elementary when my son was in kindergarten there and helped kids with some of their fall projects. I have volunteered with the Shakopee varsity football team. If anyone's gone to a Shakopee football game, you've no doubt seen my 17-year-old Jake. He's the big guy dancing on the sidelines, having a good time. And I've just been able to use that to positively impact students. Thank you.
Ms. Fugate, what have you done in the past to positively impact the students of Shakopee?
Last fall, unfortunately, we had the horrific tragedy, and I helped with 2 of the silent auctions for Shaka Strong and did some other fundraising backup for that. I also did Girl Scouts for about 10 years in the Shakopee community, taught Awana at my church, and I actually organized it where I was the commander of the Awana. I also supported all my kids in their endeavors and a few of the stragglers, their friends and family, and trying to help them with our homework. And I volunteered 1 year for the band boosters when my daughter was in 11th grade. And I also worked a little bit for the lunch store monitor at Sunpath when my one daughter was there. That's it.
Mr. Laminen, what have you done in the past to positively impact the students of Shakopee?
So I think the biggest thing with these students in Shakopee is that a lot of times they don't feel like they're heard. Over the last 2 months, I've held a weekly meet and greet event just to listen. I've had students, I've had parents, I've had taxpayers, I've had everybody coming to give me their valuable feedback. And I think that's really important for our kids, is to make sure that they're heard and make sure that their needs are being met.
Ms. Lewis, what have you done in the past to positively impact the students of Shakopee?
Well, the two most important students to me are sitting in the second row right in front of me. And the positive impact I'm having on them is I'm being a great example today and a role model that my kids can do anything. And I believe that for all kids. I think all kids have the ability to do great things and do anything. The things that I've done in the community are I have volunteered for many sporting events. My daughter is on the Shakopee High School swim team. She is on a traveling soccer team. My son is in hockey. I have been a helper with Girl Scouts over the years. And, the best thing, you said it, is listening to the kids. I do a lot of listening to my daughter's friends, my son's friends, and we can learn so much by just listening and being a great mentor and a parent to these kids. Thank you.
Mr. Pandian, what have you done in the past to positively impact the students of Shakopee?
I have two daughters. The first one went through ECFE in Shakopee. She's in first grade. I can tell you that every time she asks for a donation, I have donated. Because, I can understand the teachers are spending a lot of their own money to support the kids, the classroom, right? So for me, that's the first and foremost, right? One of the reasons I'm here is because, we got to change that. Number two, basically time, right? So for me, the biggest one is, spending time in the classroom with the kids, with my daughters, getting to know the teachers, going on field trips. That's what I have done with the kids in Shakopee. So I would say getting them involved closely in a one-to-one fashion, that's what I've done positively.
Ms. Peterson, what have you done in the past to positively impact the students of Shakopee?
One of the things that I have done is try to positively impact my son, who is currently an 8th grader at East, and provide, as Christy said, a role model to him of how to be not only a good student, but also a good citizen in the community as well as in the classroom. I have actively been involved in the community since 2003, serving as the president of the Shakopee Girls Fast Pitch Softball Association. I also served as a communications director for the organization. In 2015, I joined the Shakopee Education Endowment Foundation, and that foundation awards grants into the classrooms to help teachers with some unique learning projects and opportunities for our students that they may not otherwise receive. Also in 2014, 2015, I was part of the referendum committee.
Ms. Tomzik, what have you done in the past to positively impact the students of Shakopee?
In 1973, I started teaching in Shakopee. In fact, some of my students are in the audience. I taught high school English. I also taught junior high English. I supported students and worked directly with them who were working on passing the reading test so that they could graduate from high school. And I also worked with gifted and talented students. I've been retired for 3 years, and last year, in preparation of thinking I might like to run for school board, I subbed in many of the buildings throughout the district to kind of get a flavor for what kinds of things are happening in each building and what kind of special ways do they have of interacting with their students.
Candidates, for the balance of our questions, your answers will be 30-second answers. And for our second question, what experience or skills do you bring that would make you a good addition to the school board? What skills or experience do you bring that would make you a good addition to the school board? Ms. Fugate will begin with you.
Skills that I bring, I have a bachelor's degree in management and ethics. I just received that about 2 years ago. And I have been an executive administrative assistant for the past 30 plus some odd years. I know how to work with many different groups, many different elements. We can build teamwork, and that's the type of skills I bring.
Mr. Laminen, what experience or skills do you bring that would make you a good addition to the school board?
So I've been a part of many different management teams. I was night auditor at a hotel. I owned my own business a few years back. But I think the biggest thing that's going to make me a valuable school board member is that I'm dedicated. I've been to many school board meetings over the past 2 months. I've attended personnel committee meetings, finance, policy committee meetings, and I feel very driven to give our students a very good quality education.
Ms. Lewis, what experience or skills do you bring that would make you a good addition to the school board?
Well, I am very tuned to finances. We can all get a funny here. I am the CEO of all of our finances at the Lewis household. I also am a very strategic role within the company I work for. We deal with complex situations and multi-million-dollar deals every day. And I'm an outside-of-the-box thinker. I have board experience on 2 different boards. Thank you.
Mr. Pandian, what experience or skills do you bring that would make you a good addition to the school board?
You probably heard a lot about this. I have an MBA in finance. I like to emphasize that, especially with the current situation where we are trying to rebuild our fund balance. I have managed multi-million-dollar budgets, hundreds of millions actually, which I would like to bring it back to the school board and ask the questions, the tough questions, when something is presented in front of you. I also want to bring the private sector discipline and knowledge back to the school board and take it to the next level.
Ms. Peterson, experience and skills.
Well, I have a Bachelor of Arts in Communications and Journalism from Augustana, as well as a master's degree in business communication from St. Thomas in Minneapolis. I also have over 20 years of experience being a communications leader and manager in various different public and private companies, as well as volunteer organizations that I've been heavily involved in. And with that comes also the financial management of those businesses.
Ms. Tomzik, experience or skills?
I have 4 master's degrees in education, plus I have an MBA, and I think that balance between knowing how education happens for a lot of different kinds of students, plus understanding finances will help me be a contributing member to the board. I also wrote several successful grants for the school district, and I manage the finances for each of those grants.
Mr. Aldrich, experience or skills?
I am currently the CFO of the company that I work for in Eden Prairie. I have been either a controller or CFO of companies since 1997. I work daily on budgets and financials, and with the issues that the school board had with the budget in the last few years, I think that my experience will be welcome.
Mr. Christensen, what experience or skills do you bring that would make you a good addition to the school board?
I'm currently an IT professional with United Healthcare. In that role, I support over 5,500 different computer applications. Given the IT breach that we had over the summer, I can bring that expertise in to make sure that it does not happen again. I'm also a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, which brings an attitude of can do and will do, and I will do the job.
Candidates, what is the #1 issue facing the school district, and what would you do about it? What is the #1 issue facing the school district, and what would you do about it? Ms. Lewis will begin this answer with you.
Well, I feel that the #1 issue right now is restoring the fund balance. That's on everybody's mind. What I would do is I would bring my outside-of-the-box thinking skills, my collaborative ways of finding the solutions. There are so many great ideas that I have. I'm going to refrain from sharing all of those ideas today, but I am very confident that we can restore the fund balance utilizing those ideas.
Mr. Pandian, what is the #1 issue facing the school district, and what would you do about it?
The #1 issue is the fund balance. We need to be around 8 to 12%. We are getting better. We are going to be, around 3 to 4% right now. I think next maybe next year. The reason is without the fund balance, we can't invest on the kids. The skills I would bring is I talked in the video: zero-based budgeting, question the budgets, negotiations with the vendor, see that, bring in more additional revenue through private-public partnerships. So that's what we need to work on.
Ms. Peterson, what is the number one issue facing the school district, and what would you do about it?
I echo the same things that the previous candidates said about our financial state in the district. I'm very happy to hear that things are moving in the right direction as far as what our fund balance is, what it's projected to be at the end of this fiscal year, where we'll be nearing almost $4.5 million, which I think is great. And in order to do that, we need to stay within the budget. We need to stay within the realm and of what the citizens are wanting us to spend.
Ms. Tomzik, what is the number one issue facing the school district, and what would you do about it?
I too agree with the other candidates that we need to pay a lot of attention to the fund balance. Finances are important to our district. We can't serve our students unless we attend to that. One of the ways we can look at saving money is that now we're a large school district. There will be economies of scale that we can have with vendors, for example. But I want to also say that I'm concerned about student achievement. We're slightly above the state average, and I think we should be a lot above the state average.
Mr. Aldrich, number one issue.
Well, the number one reason that I'm running is because of the fiscal problem that we've had over the last several years. The fund balance is obviously important, not just for now, but for the future. Once we get that built back up, then we can start really focusing again on the children, because it seems like the last few years it's all been focused on this. Once we get over this crisis, for lack of a better word, we can move on to much better and more important things.
Mr. Christensen, number one issue.
While I agree with all the other candidates that there is a serious problem with our fund balance, something that's going along with this is there is a severe lack of trust in the community. All the people that I have talked to while I've been out campaigning have told me flat out they do not trust the school board. We need to be transparent in what we're doing, telling people where we're spending money and why. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fugate, number one issue.
Besides the funds and the fiscal, we need to be truthful, clear, concise with our communication so we can rebuild the bridge with the community. So if we would have to come to you for either a building or more levy, then the community might be willing to help pass something like that if our bridge and our trust is rebuilt with the community again.
Mr. Lehman, what is the number one issue facing the school district, and what would you do about it?
So I echo a lot of the other candidates' sentiments on that, but I think that the biggest issue that we have right now is actually our facilities management. We have Pearson still closed. We have elementary school boundaries that still need to be fixed. And I think those are things that kind of got pushed to the wayside while we were, fixing this financial issue. So I feel like that is very important to me.
Candidates, fiscal responsibility has been a key theme in this campaign. What specific programs or areas of the school district budget do you believe can be eliminated or reduced to lower the school district's annual budget? What specific programs or areas of the budget do you believe can be eliminated or reduced to lower the school district's annual budget? Ms. Peterson, we'll begin with you.
That's a good question. I honestly don't know if there is a ton that can be reduced or cut, only from the fact that the school district has done a very diligent job in doing that to bring us back to be more fiscally responsible and to bring back our fund balance. I would have to really look at specific details within our budget to determine what more there is to cut, because I don't believe we can.
Ms. Tomzik, what specific programs or areas of the budget do you believe can be eliminated or reduced to lower the school district's annual budget?
I do think a lot of cuts have been made already, and they've been pretty severe cuts. And just to allay a lot of people's concern, I want you to know that it's been both on the administrative side as well as teachers in the classroom side. So I would agree that with Christy that there isn't a lot more that we can cut. However, I think we can continue to look at ways to make the spending that we do more efficient, to check in with vendors, for example. And since we're such a large school district.
Mr. Aldrich, what specific programs or areas of the school district budget do you believe can be eliminated or reduced to lower the school district's annual budget?
I would have to look through the budget line by line to try to find what we can cut, but not necessarily what we can cut. We must be more efficient with everybody, with how we spend our money, and we might have to cut people that we don't want to cut just because they're duplicating different jobs, and efficiencies in the budget is the best way to do that.
Mr. Christensen, what specific areas of the budget do you believe can be eliminated or reduced to lower the school district's annual budget?
Well, first and foremost, before we start spending money, we need to ask one big question. How does this benefit the students? Like Mr. Aldrich said, I need to look at this budget line by line and look and see where we have the duplication. Look and see where we have potentially wasteful spending. And we need to eliminate that, and we need to restore some common sense to it.
Ms. Fugate, what specifically can be cut?
I don't think we want to cut any more teachers or staff because they are the base and they're the support system for our students. They're the best people for the job. They're trained to do it, and the students rely on the teachers. I would look at a full top-down cost analysis on what can be cut, eliminate duplicity, freeze the budget. I mean, freeze it. Don't spend it because you got it left to spend in your budget for your sector. Try to hold it back. Don't spend it.
Mr. Lehman, what can be cut?
I actually agree with Judy and Christy over here. They've made a lot of drastic cuts to get us back to a place where our fund balance is growing. I think it's important for us to stay vigilant as potential or current board members to what we are spending, and is it the best choice for us to be spending those dollars on those specific things.
Ms. Lewis, what can be cut?
Again, I don't think at this particular time there is much to cut. We would have to do the due diligence once on the board, review everything and see if there is any way where we can find opportunities to reduce expenses. I don't think it falls within elimination of teachers. I don't think it falls within eliminating technology for our students. And I don't think it falls within cutting programs for our kids for a better education.
Mr. Pandian, what specific programs or areas of the school district budget do you believe can be eliminated or reduced to lower the school district's annual budget?
I actually printed the budget file, and I read through the budget file for last year. We spent $12 million in the purchase services, vendors, actually. So my always been in the private sector is to negotiate with a vendor. As I said before, we have a huge community, and we should be able to creatively come up with some ads, concept partnership with the vendors to reduce the dollars. And I wouldn't cut teachers. I would not impact students.
Candidates, if you all are elected, there will be a mix of new and returning board members. Given the history of the board, how do you envision that working? This will be a 30-second question. Again, given the history of the board, how do you envision your working relationship? And Mr. Christensen, we'll begin with you.
One of my key points is collaboration. While we're electing four new board members, the 4 new board members can't just come in here and say, we're going to rule the roost. We need to reach out to the current board and work with them. Take the best parts of each side's ideas and do what's best for our students in our community. Thank you.
Ms. Fugate, if you are elected, there'll be a mix of new and returning board members. Given the history of the board, how do you envision that working?
Well, as it has before, we have 3 long-term sitting school board members that are still currently there. They have reached out to be a mentor to any one of us as a candidate right now and as a future board member if we get elected. And if you work as a team, you can always come to solutions. I worked on a team this past year and a half to finding things that were wrong, and we brought some stuff to light, and we came from many walks of life and many different beliefs.
Mr. Lehman, and if you're elected, there'll be a mix of new and returning board members. Given the history of the board, how do you envision that working?
On a personal scale, I mean, I've met with them many times. I've been to many board meetings, I've been to committee meetings, and I've gotten to actually pick their brain on a lot of different issues. So I don't envision myself being a problem working with the current school board. As far as everything else, I think the community is tired of the last couple years of the community versus the school board. I think we all do need to come together to fix these issues.
Ms. Lewis, if you're elected, there'll be a mix of new and returning board members. Given the history of the board, how do you envision that working?
I think this is a great opportunity for learning on both sides. The new members coming in will learn from the existing members, and the existing members will be open and gracious to learning from the new members coming in. We both have so much to offer the district, and I think together with teamwork and collaboration, we can accomplish great things.
Mr. Pandian, how do you envision new and returning board members working?
I think it's a great opportunity. I think the old members have the traditional knowledge how the system works. The new members bring new ideas and perspectives. So when you put those two together, it's going to be excellent. That's what I was saying. And also going back to, you have respect. You can have different opinion, but respectfully disagree or agree. End of the day, it's all about the kids and the community.
Ms. Peterson, given the history of the board, how do you envision new and existing board members working?
Well, I think it's a great opportunity to learn. As much as I've been involved in different committees within the school district over the past few years, I see working with the 3 members that will be staying on the board is a great opportunity to learn, to listen, ask questions as to why did you make the decisions that you did? Tell me about the background that the public may not know. And I think by doing that and sharing that dialogue with other members, you'll create a strong working relationship.
Ms. Tomzik, how do you envision new and returning board members working?
I was appointed to the board in April, and since that time, I have to say the board has been extremely welcoming. They've met with me individually to give me information so I could catch up. I think, though, that with new people, we will have to consciously build collaboration. The Minnesota School Boards Association offers training along these lines, and as a new school board member, I'd definitely go, and hopefully we'd create some extra coordination with that.
Mr. Aldrich, if you are elected, there will be a mix of new and returning board members. Given the history of the board, how do you envision that working?
The current board has dealt with a lot over the last few years, to put it mildly. Who's ever elected will bring new ideas. They have their ideas. I think we can work together, teach each other. They've weathered the storm over the last couple of years, and I think if we're elected, we can learn a lot from them.
Candidates, if elected and you have exhausted all other options, and you face a choice between an operating levy increase and increasing class sizes, which would you choose and why? Mr. Laminen, we're going to begin with you. If elected and you have exhausted all other options and you face a choice between an operating levy increase and increasing class sizes, which would you choose and why?
So I think if we're talking about a hypothetical situation where we've literally exhausted every other option, I am absolutely not for increasing class sizes. I think that's one of the problems that we still need to fix. But I think it's important to have that open communication and dialogue with the community if we were to put an operating levy forward. I honestly don't like both of these options, but if I had to choose one, that would be it.
Ms. Lewis, if elected and you've exhausted all other options and you face a choice between an operating levy increase and increasing class sizes, which would you choose and why?
I would agree. Neither are optional. They're both terrible options. So to increase the levy is not great for the community, right? Taxes go up. To increase class sizes, it reduces our children's learning. I'm not sure I can even answer that one, which I would pick, because I would have to really understand what impact it would have on the community and the students and the teachers. Elementary side.
Mr. Pandian, if elected and you've exhausted all other options and you face a choice between an operating levy increase and increasing class sizes, which would you choose and why?
I personally don't think this will ever happen in real life. I have been in many scenarios. Assume that we are in that world. I would say, I cannot increase the class size. I will do operating levy, and I will tell the citizens, I will give you that in return with the interest rate in 2 years or 1 year once we have the fund balance. That'll be my take because the citizens benefit from that as well because they invested the money, they're getting the money back.
Ms. Peterson, if elected and you have exhausted all other options and you face a choice between an operating levy increase and increasing class sizes, which would you choose and why?
Well, as the other candidate said, neither one is an option that I would be in support of, but if I had to pick one, I think that more than likely we would have to look at an operating levy if we went out to the public and told the whole story. Here's why we have to do it. Here's what the return is going to be on doing an operating levy. We have referendums that are going to be expiring and coming off the books, so there may be some opportunity, but hopefully we don't have to do that.
Ms. Tomzik, operating levy or class size?
I have concerns about class size in Shakopee, not across the board, because I think there's some places where it's quite balanced, but there are other places where we definitely need to pay attention to that and do something about it. If we had to go for an operating levy, I agree that we would really have to inform the public and find many, many ways to reach out to the public to let them know. We will be retiring some debt, so a levy may not have as much added cost for taxpayers.
Mr. Aldridge, operating levy or class size?
I'm completely against increasing class sizes, but with the lack of trust that the community has in the district and the school board, an operation levy at this time is not feasible. I wouldn't want to have to do either of them. There's always other options. Increasing class size you'd almost have to do that just because the operating levy would not pass.
Mr. Christensen, operating levy or class size?
Well, this would be a worst-case scenario decision financially for the district. Our class sizes are okay, but they need to be better. But again, with the lack of trust between the school board and the community, getting an operating levy to pass would be a difficult sell. I would have to look at the merits of the entire scenario, plus try to work with the city on TIF districts.
Ms. Fugate, if elected and you've exhausted all other options and you face a choice between an operating levy increase and increasing class sizes, which would you choose and why?
Well, again, neither's great, but if we did have to go to the public after trust has been rebuilt, after we've exhausted every measure to cut where we can, we should, if we have to, ask for an inch but don't take a mile if we did ask for a levy. I mean, try to keep it as low as possible, to explain the return, and have lots of conversations with the community.
Well, our time is running out. Anyone whose questions have not been answered should ask the candidates this evening after the debate or contact their campaign offices. You can find out more about all of our candidates at the Chamber's website, shakopee.org. Each candidate will now have 1 minute to make closing statements. The order of their closing statements was selected by drawing. And Mr. Christensen, we will begin with you.
My platform is to build trust between the school district and the community. Without the community, we don't have good schools. We don't have mentorship. We don't have public-private partnerships. We need to build the trust. We need to be transparent, and we need to be collaborative. I would like to personally wish every candidate the best of luck this year. May the best people win.
Mr. Christensen, the timer was incorrect and it gave you 30 seconds. If you'd like 30 seconds more, we would welcome you, or we could move on to the second candidate.
Okay. Way to chop it up on me.
I do apologize.
That's okay. When I've been speaking with many of the taxpayers, parents, students over the past few months, they feel like they have no voice. And with me, you will have a voice. We may not always agree. We may have to agree to disagree. But I think we can find common ground and mutual respect. And that's something that we sorely need.
Ms. Tomzik, 60 seconds for your closing statement.
I think as a school board member, I would really want to emphasize communication. I think every voter is a member of the school board. And as I've gone around talking to groups about running for school board, every time someone asked me a question or registered a concern, I sought out an answer to them and got back with them. And I would like to continue to do that. I have a passion for education, but especially a passion for Shakopee students. We have so much that is praiseworthy in our district, and it's kind of too bad that a lot of that has gotten lost in the last couple of years. And we need to change that because we want all of us to be proud of what we belong to. We want our students and our teachers to be proud to represent Shakopee and to want to achieve because we have such a positive direction. And I thank everybody who's here and for all the great discussions we've had about voting. Thank you.
Ms. Lewis?
Great. Thanks. I agree with Judy. I am extremely passionate about Shakopee. The Christy Lewis promise that I can give you tonight is that I promise to listen with an open mind to everybody in the community, the teachers and the students. I promise to learn and utilize my strengths and my skills for the betterment of the district. I promise to collaborate with my fellow board members and come up with the best possible solution for whatever task it is that we're dealing with at the time. I promise from the bottom of my heart to give you the best Christy Lewis that I can possibly give you with the highest level of integrity. And I am so excited to be on this journey. I respectfully ask for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Mr. Aldrich?
This election's really about three things: trust, accountability, and transparency. First of all, trust. Who are you going to trust with your money? The company I work for, I started when I was 24 years old. They trusted me with a company that was a week old. I hope you can trust me with your tax dollars. Accountability, which goes right into transparency, communication. We need to listen, and we need to actually hear what you need, what you want. Because in business, communication is the number one reason why people fail, and a lack of communication is why everything happened. I'd like to thank the Chamber for having this debate, and I appreciate everybody who showed up.
Mr. Pandian?
First of all, thank you, Shakopee Chamber of Commerce, for having this forum, and thanks for everyone who are here and also watching, maybe will be. First of all, and first and foremost, the reason for me to run is I'm a parent. I'm a parent of two daughters in Shakopee School District. So any decision I make is going to be with regards to the kids. And I believe in academic excellence. I mean, we need to have the best education possible. How can we do it? We need money for it. We got to be able to invest the money. Where is the money? Well, we can't go to the community. It's not fair because people are on budget, right? We got to make sure that we respect their budget, respect their income. So we will have to come up with ways where we can increase the fund balance, and that's where I bring in my MBA skills and private sector skills, and so that we can invest that money on children, community, and take the district to the next level. That's what I'm here for, and running for the school board. Thank you.
Ms. Peterson?
Well, one of the things that I have continuously heard over the last couple years in this community is we want change. We want change on the school board. But I want to leave you with one thing tonight, and that is, what kind of change do you want? I will tell you that I will bring positive change if elected to the Shakopee School Board. I am very trustworthy, I am fiscally responsible, I am very diligent, and am very willing to roll up my sleeves and dig into the details. I'm honest, and I'm a very strong communicator. And that's one of the things that we have been lacking in our district to our community. It's communicating what is going on Not necessarily all the good things, because I think we've done a pretty good job of communicating what's going well, but we need to also communicate other things. And I would ask for your support and your vote on November 6th.
Ms. Fugate.
Well, I was part of a very small group that founded a issue with the purchase cards of a certain ex-superintendent. However, that was negative. A lot of people didn't like it, but it needed to be said, it needed to be done, and look where we are. We need to move forward, but we got to get the mud off the feet so we can move forward. There's still things that have to be addressed: transparency, communication with the district, from the district to the people, and the teachers need a voice. I've heard from so many teachers and staff that we're afraid to say anything because if we do, we get retribution. So I would love to find a way that we can give teachers a voice where they have no fear of being fired or demoted or whatever. And I'm still going to continue to dig in information. I'm still going to work hard. I did it since last March, so I'm going for that.
Mr. Lehmanen.
First off, I want to thank the Chamber and River Valley Church for hosting tonight, and for everybody who's here or watching on YouTube or TV. Thank you so much for being engaged citizens in your community, and thank you to the candidates for standing up here, because you all love your community, and I admire you all for stepping up to run. I'm a father of a 3-year-old at Stepping Stones Preschool here in Shakopee. I'm a husband to my beautiful wife, Ray Lynn. We love Shakopee. Shakopee is our home. I think it's important, if I was elected to a school board, to be able to sit down and listen and have those compassionate and understanding dialogues with the community. We're always not going to agree. We may disagree sometimes, and that's okay, as long as we can find some common ground and work together. So thank you very much, and I ask for your vote on November 6th.
As we close this portion of our discussion, please remember that the views expressed in tonight's forum are those of the candidates, not those of the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber sponsors this event as a service to our community and has gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure the objectivity of our forum. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate. Instead, we seek to provide the businesses and voters of Shakopee with the information you need to make informed choices when you vote. Thank you to our audience this evening. Thank you to River Valley Church for hosting our event. And on behalf of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau, thank you to all of you, our candidates. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your service to our community. Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. Please remember to vote. We'll now take a brief intermission while we prepare for our City Council candidates. Thank you and good night. Good evening and welcome to the 2018 Shakopee City Council Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. Tonight we're gathered at River Valley Church's Shakopee campus. My name is Rob O'Neill. I am the pastor of Resonate Community Church and a member of the Chamber. I'll be serving as tonight's moderator. All of the candidates for Shakopee City Council were invited to participate this evening. With us are Ms. Jody Brennan, Ms. Angelica Contreras, Mr. Caden Fox, Mr. Matt Harden, Mr. Bradley McGarr, Councilor Kathy Mokel, Mr. Jordan Olson, Mr. James Pleckenpole, and Mr. Arvid Sorenberger. Would you join me in welcoming our candidates this evening? Candidates are arranged in alphabetical order. Candidates have already recorded video introductions of themselves to the community, and you can see those online, so our candidates will not make opening statements this evening. I encourage you to watch their videos instead. Tonight, candidates will be asked a series of questions. They'll have 30 seconds to respond unless indicated otherwise. Our first question this evening will actually be a 60-second question, and it'll go to all candidates. Candidates, envision Shakopee's #1 response from citizens was a desire to create a fresh impression. What does this mean to you, and how would you act on this request from citizens? You'll have 60 seconds to respond. Envision Shakopee's #1 response from citizens was a desire to create a fresh impression. What does this mean to you, and how would you act on this request from citizens? Ms. Brennan, we'll begin with you.
Thank you very much. Fresh impression would involve talking to the community to see what they feel is important for their community. Is it parks? Is it business? Is it new housing? Is it being vibrant downtown? I think we have a lot of options available for us, but I think that we need to talk to our community and our business partners to see exactly what that means. Thank you.
Ms. Contreras, what does create a fresh impression mean to you, and how would you act on this request from citizens?
Well, first of all, thank you. From the things I've heard, in the plan that we've seen and the envision, there's tons of fresh creations that people want to see, and one of them even working on, the riverfront. It's been forgotten, and that would be something that, we can work on. It might not be something that, is doable right now, but I mean, that's something we've already heard, working on our river. So, I mean, that'd be something that I would, be willing to view and to see what we can do with that.
Mr. Fox, what does create a fresh impression mean to you, and how would you act on this request from citizens?
The first thing that comes to mind is the access gateways we have, like coming into town with 101 and 169 in both areas, and north coming over the bridge. So we just put in that statue last year, was it earlier this year, whichever it was. But that creates a fresh impression coming into Shakopee. You see that the people here care and they invest and they take time. And Jody was a great part of that, if I'm not mistaken. You played a big part into the projects supporting downtown. But I mean, that's how you do it. Like, we invest in a gateway when you're coming down 169, whether it's signage or foliage or access boulevards. I mean, right now it's kind of run down. And parking at Valley Fair is kind of treacherous with the potholes, so we make investments. We make it look nice, and when businesses see that we care about how Shakopee looks, they care and they share that investment with us. And Canterbury is a great example of that.
Mr. Harden, what does create a fresh impression mean to you, and how would you act on this request from citizens?
Thank you. First of all, I think that we should all go to Holiday gas station and get chocolate chip cookies, because that helps everybody out. I think we need to go back 22 years ago when I was first here and let free market happen. Let's not letting big government run our city. If you ever notice that almost every event that Shakopee has, there's not really a lot of culturals represented at those events. We are a multicultural city, and if you don't see your neighbor there who might be a different ethnicity, you should reach out to them, include them to go with, so that way we can tell people Shakopee is a home. I feel welcome here. I feel loved by my neighbors.
Mr. McGarr, create a fresh impression. What does this mean to you, and how would you act on this request?
Well, for me, creating a fresh impression is reintroducing Shakopee and all of our potential and all of our benefits, not only to the rest of the metro region, but to the state as a whole. I think a lot of people know of Shakopee, but I don't think they know about Shakopee. They don't know who we are. They don't know of our diversity. They don't know of our strengths and our potential. And so oftentimes we are a place to go to Valley Fair or Canterbury Park or Mystic Lake, or we're a place that people are going through to Mankato or out of state, or coming from Mankato into the Twin Cities. We're a stopover. And reintroducing ourselves to the rest of the state and even the rest of the country by rebranding ourselves and promoting our values and what we really are here for and our diversity and all the positive aspects of our community, I think that is what we're talking about, making a fresh impression.
Councilor Mokel, what does create a fresh impression mean to you, and how would you act on this request?
Well, creating a fresh impression to me is knowing that you hit Shakopee city limits. Right now, we really don't have anywhere that says, welcome to Shakopee, and identifies that you have now hit the city limits. So that is part of what identifying those areas is. It's also, we are part of River South. The only time you really acknowledge that is when you drive through Canterbury. So it's also knowing that you are now in River South District 2. I think that it's also creating more of a welcoming environment. I know the Heritage Society is working on the downtown trail project and identifying those areas through historical values that is to Shakopee, so that people who come and visit those parks can know how Shakopee got started. And so that's what I would do.
Mr. Olson, what does create a fresh impression mean to you, and how would you act on this request?
Thank you. What does a fresh impression mean to me? Fresh blood, fresh leadership for the city. The problems we faced over the past few years have shown us that a lot of investors are questioning us lately, and I think by getting new people in there, new ideas, and welcoming people with a new attitude would put on a great fresh impression for the city, and that's what I intend to do.
Mr. Fleckenpole, what does create a fresh impression mean to you, and how would you act on this request?
I think Shakopee does need a new, fresh impression. We've got a great city. We need to expand our image. We need to reach a consensus with staff, with City Council, to take a fresh look at the issues and problems that are addressing the city. I think we need to respect each other's opinions and positions, and just go from there, I guess. It's a beautiful city. I'm proud of it, and we have to move on, and we do need a fresh look.
Mr. Sornberger, if elected, what does create a fresh impression mean to you, and how would you act on this request from citizens?
Good evening, everybody. We've already started down that road with the foundation of Envision Shakopee. So we've got the foundation for creating a new, fresh vision. But what we need to do is market that to the other communities around us and really establish that within our own community through collective teamwork and leadership, from the school district to the city council to the Chamber of Commerce. Collectively market that to the rest of the state and other surrounding cities.
Candidates, for this next question, you'll have 30 seconds to answer. And considering the Chamber of Commerce is responsible for the Main Street program, this question may seem self-serving. We did not write this one, however. It was submitted by a business owner. But we're going to ask it. If elected, would you support continuing the Main Street program grant from the city? Why or why not? Mr. Fox, we'll begin with you.
This is easy. I pretty much just already answered it. When we show an investment in our community, that is noticed. People see when a town cares. Places like Billy's and Brian's are historic locations. They bring people from all across the state. White Bear Lake, would you drive an hour to pick up a shirt? People do, because of people like Billy and places like him, and the programs we have to keep them, those historic fronts, current and accessible.
Mr. Hardin, if elected, would you support continuing the Main Street program grant from the city? Why or why not?
Once again, it comes down to making common sense decisions with your money. Are we doing a program, once again, just to benefit business owners? We don't get money given to us to put a new roof on our house or to paint our house. So what common sense decision and how much money is this going to cost us, the taxpayers?
Mr. McGarr, if elected, would you support continuing the Main Street program grant from the city? Why or why not?
I would, and I've seen similar grant programs done in other cities across the nation that have historic downtowns, and it really helps ensure that we have a vibrant downtown community where our core businesses are, draws people into the heart of our community rather than the big box stores on the outside, and really allows us to put our best face forward. And it's really not that much of an investment considering what it brings in.
Councilor Mokel, if elected, would you support continuing the Main Street program grant from the city? Why or why not?
Absolutely. I think that we've, as a community, have all seen the benefit of that program when we go to Rhythm on the Rails. The last 2 years, it's been a successful program that was put on by our Main Street program. And that brought people to downtown that maybe had never been there because they were going to see their favorite bands and those types of things. And it was drawing people into stores days and weeks later. So I think it's been a successful program, and I would continue to support it.
Mr. Olson, do you support continuing the Main Street program?
If I was elected council, I would take a look at this and say, I'm actually, philosophically, I'm not for giving your taxpayer dollars to private business owners, but as a historian, I understand the significance of this, but it's policy. If you set a cap on it, you should keep that cap where it's at. You can't just pick and choose winners and say this guy's gonna get more money than the other, so that's what I would do.
Mr. Pleckenpole, would you support the Main Street program?
In general, I would support it. It sounds good on the surface, but again, as one other candidate said, I'm concerned on the burden on the taxpayers, what the cost, how cost effective it would be. We do need to move forward, but I would say we need to do it slow, think things over, and look at it with a common sense approach.
Mr. Sornberger, would you support the Main Street grant?
Based on two separate metrics, yes. The first being the return on investment for the citizens, and it gets to be more complex than 30 seconds will give me. And the second one is the cost of lost opportunity. We always look at investments as expenses. Well, there's a real return on investment, and if you don't make the investment, what are you going to lose by not doing so? So yes.
Ms. Brennan, would you support the Main Street program?
I do support the Main Street program. I believe it's about a $25,000 investment that the city is putting into the program. It's bringing our community together. It's building businesses. It's creating pathways. We did the tunnel that we refurbished and painted. I think it's a great opportunity, and it's a great way to build community, and I think it's a good investment.
Ms. Contreras, if elected, would you support continuing the Main Street program grant from the city? Why or why not?
I would, yes. I've seen it, I've been part of it, and I've seen the great success. Just the idea, I'm very into seeing, a diverse community coming out and participating, and maybe slowly but surely they're starting to come out and be part of it, and the benefit that the business are getting. So yes, I would.
Well, candidates, for our next question, you'll have 30 seconds to respond. What mistakes, if any, has the city made in using tax increment financing? What mistakes, if any, has the city made in using tax increment financing? Mr. McGarr, we'll begin with you.
I think the big mistake that we've made in using tax increment financing is not making sure that the projects that we are using TIF for are actually going to benefit the larger community. We've done TIF financing for soil remediation for a business up here near Red Oak, where I work at. We've added TIF for an apartment complex of luxury apartments on the riverfront. Those aren't going to benefit the larger community of residents here.
Councilor Mokel, what mistakes, if any, has the city made in using tax increment financing?
I think the city has been very responsible with tax increment financing. We have always used tax increment financing for the building the sewer systems, the waterways, infrastructure for the areas around it. We don't give it to let them move barns or anything like that. We also used it for soil remediation because without doing those soil remediations, that land will not have value, and it won't benefit all the taxpayers because we won't be able to have a little higher tax on that after it's developed.
Mr. Olson, what mistakes, if any, has the city made in using tax increment financing?
I think the biggest mistake the city has made by using TIF thus far is going outside of the original policy of TIF was supposed to bring high-paying jobs to this community. Okay, well now we're using it to bring in residential units. I think when you set a policy, especially with a 5-0 vote, you should follow that policy even if you might disagree with a single project. Thank you.
Mr. Pleckenpole, what mistakes has the city made in using tax increment financing?
I'm pretty much along with Mr. Olson here and what he said. We need to really move forward with caution. Depending how many of these tax increment financing districts we put out, how much of a burden is that going to be on the taxpayer in general until the tax increment financing thing comes to a close? I think we need to, as a council, reach a consensus and move forward, caution, use common sense thinking when we create these districts to make sure that everybody gets.
Mr. Sornberger, what mistakes has the city made in using TIF?
I think there's probably two. They could be a little more judicious in its usage, but again, that gets to be a very complex thing to look at. And secondarily, I think there's a lot of misinformation on that complexity. We could work at communicating that better to the citizens, getting feedback from them, and also getting buy-in. They are the stakeholders in this.
Ms. Brennan, mistakes with TIF.
I do not believe there has been mistakes with TIF. I think all of our TIF districts have been very successful. I think we are bringing in business and we are bringing in jobs. For example, the Canterbury district is building roads and building infrastructure with those TIF dollars so that there's housing, so that there's businesses, so there's entertainment, and all those components are bringing in jobs and bringing in taxes to our
Ms.
community.
Contreras, mistakes with TIF.
I don't think there's any mistakes. They have been very responsible with what they've done. And I do have to agree with both Ms. Councilwoman Moko and Ms. Brennan here, that they have, they have a goal. And there's been a goal and they've brought in jobs, the housing for the people. So it's fine with me.
Mr. Fox, mistakes with TIF.
I'd say really, as everyone else has echoed, the city administrator, Bill Reynolds, went through a comprehensive report on just about every TIF district Shakopee's had, and they've all been successful. I think a quarter or a third of them outperformed expectations. So if anything, the biggest mistake we've made with TIF is how we've educated the public and about how it works. It's about outside companies investing in our infrastructure and staying here for the long haul, giving us jobs and new features, things we love.
Mr. Harden, what mistakes, if any, has the city made in using tax increment financing?
You know what? I'm sorry. We want to give somebody your money that lives way over there, who's already a billionaire, that doesn't need our money to get something started. I believe that we need to be a free market. Let them come to us. Everybody in here is good people. This is a good community. Let them spend their billions of dollars to come here. Why are we giving it to them? I work too hard for my money to give $84 million to somebody.
Candidates, for this next question, you'll have 30 seconds to respond. Trends suggest that buyers and renters want more density, but that has been a challenge for developers with a lack of R4 zoning. What is the place for or problem with higher density housing in your mind? What is the place for or problem with higher density housing in your mind? Mr. Olson, will begin with you.
Ooh, I get to go first this time. I figured he was going to ask me first. My issue with high-density housing is our ins and outs of this community. We have 169 that's already almost backed up every morning for rush hour traffic and home at night. I think that if we put higher densities in anywhere, they should be around the major intersections. Downtown, for example, I fear there's going to be a parking problem, and I'm out of time.
Mr. Pleckenpole, what is the place for or problem with higher density housing in your mind?
I have a little bit of a problem with the high density housing. We need a place for people to come and people to live. It's all well and good, but there's also side problems. We're going to have transportation problems. Is the infrastructure going to handle it? Is the city going to be able to provide fire, police services, and the other services that the city needs to keep up with the high-density population coming in? I think it's a very difficult question to answer. It's got multifaceted answers.
Time, thank you. Mr. Sornberger, what is the place for or problem with higher density housing in your mind?
The problem is a realistic problem. The planet is growing exponentially in population. People want to live like a lot of us do in this beautiful town in this area. We're going to have to manage that. We're going to have to make developments that are good lifestyles for everyone, not just for a few. And it's going to happen. 169's here, folks. They're coming. How are we going to deal with that? Collectively, as leaders, we need to have a vision to figure that out and do it properly for everybody's lifestyle.
Ms. Brennan, what is the place for or problem with higher density housing?
I believe that every project that comes before the city and the council and the planning commission deserves to be looked at, whether it's a single-family residential area or high-density housing. And at that time that you determine, time that a project is coming in, you determine if the infrastructure is in place. So every project deserves a look at. Thank you.
Ms. Contreras, what is the place for or problem with higher density housing?
Well, that is the problem, finding out where exactly to put them. There is a need of diverse, housing and high density. We do need them. We want people who are actually working here also to live here. But that is something we do have to look at, look into and figure out where exactly they would go. I'd need to look into it into depth.
Mr. Fox, what is the place for or problem with higher density housing in your mind?
I think the biggest problem is just location, because you've got a lot of people in one spot, so it's easier for people to live a carless lifestyle if they're near centers of transit or centers of commerce. So by large shopping malls or in our downtown area or just off the bus stop, I mean, those are great places for high density housing, and it's something we need, because we need housing that people that work here can afford, and we need jobs that people that live here want to work. So between that two, I mean, we have to put people here to keep our taxes coming down.
Mr. Harden, what is the place for or problem with higher density housing in your mind?
The problem with higher density housing is we're going to be like Minneapolis singing George Johnson, we're moving on up. Shakopee is not the place for higher density housing. We won't even be able to have the infrastructure to handle it. Not only that, but we won't even have enough water if we don't have slower growth. And you don't want to smell a black man who's not taking a bath.
Mr. McGarr, what is the place for or problem with higher density housing in your mind?
Shakopee definitely needs to look into higher density housing. As someone else said, people are moving to Shakopee. That's going to happen. But we also need to look at the realistic part of that. 60% of the households in Shakopee make under $100,000 a year. Seniors, our annual income is $37,000 a year. Many of them are disabled. They're not going to be able to own a single-family home or rent a single-family home if it's going to cost $14,000 a month.
Councilor Mokel, what is the place for or problem with higher density housing in your mind?
I think that the biggest problem with high-density housing is our job of educating the public on what that needs are and how these trends are changing. I think that it also has to do with the planning. When we put these projects out there, we always think about the transportation second. We really should be planning these centers that we have the transportation able to come in and support those housing developments. And I think that's the two issues that I see with high density.
Candidates, for our last question this evening, Shakopee City Council has experienced significant internal turmoil recently. How would you work with others on the council? You'll have 30 seconds to answer the question. How would you work with others on the council? Mr. Sornberger, we'll begin with you.
Well, thank you. I think that is a major problem, and I think that we need to have an attitude of cooperation. My educational background is in psychology, and for those who know, there's more than one type of psychology, child psychology. So that enables me to work with other people as well. But I think that's what we really need to do is, as leadership, show unity. It goes back to the first question of how do we brand ourselves. The image outside this town with what we faced thus far has not been positive.
Ms. Brennan, how would you work with others on the council?
I believe you have to know what you're doing. I believe I know all of the current city council. I know the staff. I think the open-mindedness and open communication with all entities that are involved reduces the amount of friction that can occur if you don't know what you're doing or don't know what you're talking about. I've been involved for a number of years. I have not had a conflict issue with any of them.
Ms. Contreras, how would you work with others on the council?
First of all, show my respect. That's something that we've lost currently. We need respect. Communicate with each other, that's another thing. In a good, happy marriage, there's tons of communication. And if we're gonna work together, we need to communicate. And we need to work in unity. We need to bring everybody together and stop the war. That's it.
Mr. Fox, how would you work with others on the council?
Does everyone standing in front of a mic want to work together to do what's best for Shakopee?
Yep.
Yes.
I hope we'll be a little better than that. But yeah, I mean, just work together. What makes sense? We're all here. We got to live together. Why not love each other while we're at it? It's not that hard.
Mr. Harden, how would you work with others on the council?
It comes back to Aretha Franklin singing RSPECT. Some respect for each other about your views, your opinions, and working together. Stop trying to shove policies on each other like a bad oatmeal cookie. It doesn't work. People don't like it. All right? We need to be respectful and try to understand where each other are coming from.
Mr. McGarr, how would you work with others on the council?
I think the main thing is to remember when we walk into that chamber, when we walk out of that chamber at all times, we're neighbors. Whether I live downtown and someone lives out near Lake O'Dowd, we're neighbors. We're all part of the same community. We're all Shakopee. And we need to respect each other like that and treat each other as if they were our neighbor that we're going to see every day. Because, and honestly, we are going to see them every day in one way or another.
Councilor Mokel, how would you work with others on the council?
I think it's understanding that when we are all trying to do what's best for Shakopee, every one of us, and respecting our ideas and our differences. We are not always going to agree on the issues, but at least that we can walk away from the dais and understand that we did what we want for our community.
Mr. Olson, how would you work with others on the council?
Thank you. I want to reflect what several of the other candidates just said. I will operate with a dignity and respect to the other candidates. There's no matter who gets elected up here, I will be respectful and courteous to any one of these people. And that will be my duty as a counselor. And I will not take things personally, and I will not attack you personally either at all. We can disagree all day long, but at the end of the day, that is what Shakopee is about.
Mr. Pleckenpole, how would you work with others on the council?
I agree with several of the other members that were candidates. We need to respect each other. We need to respect each other's opinions. We need to compromise. We need to work together. I believe that council needs to form a consensus with staff and form a solid front when addressing the issues and problems facing the city today and into the future. We need to respect each other. We need to respect each other's opinions, and we need to work hard for the betterment of all the citizens in Shakopee.
Our time is running out. If you have not had your question answered this evening, you should ask the candidates directly. They'll be staying for a while after this forum, or contact their campaign offices. You can find out more about all of our candidates at the Chamber's website, shakopee.org. Each candidate will now have 1 minute for their closing statements. The order of their closing statements has been selected by drawing, and we will begin with Mr. Olson.
Thank you. My name is Jordan Olson. I'm running for Shakopee because I love making a difference in this city, and I love people. I love interacting with people and doing the right thing with positive energy. And I know that we all have our differences, and I think social media has actually taught that to a lot of us over the last couple of years. But that aside, this is about you. It's about us. This is our city. And if you elect me counselor, I will always have an ear for you, and I will be respectful and courteous to any one of these members up here that might get elected alongside of me. So I ask for your vote this year, 2018, and I look forward to meeting many more of you. Thank you.
Mr. Pleckenpole, 60 seconds.
I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Shakopee. I've seen the ups and downs. Fortunately, there's been more ups as things have done better. I've worked with, my career was 32 years in the textile leasing industry, solving problems, sales, marketing. I've worked on and volunteered on various committees and organizations in Shakopee. I feel a pulse for the city. I've learned to respect, I've learned to compromise, and hopefully I've picked up some wisdom over the years. I'm not an I person. When I go to work on the council, I'm going to be an I person. I'm asking for the advice and the voting citizens of Shakopee to be my partners. I need your advice. I need your support. Together, we can move Shakopee forward at a pace that all of our wallets will allow.
Councilor Mokel.
First of all, I want to thank the Chamber and Shakopee Valley News for putting on this forum for us tonight so that we can each get our what we represent out to each of you. I have been happy to serve the community of Shakopee for the last 5 years. I consider it a privilege that I represent every one of you, even if we may agree to disagree. I believe in my time I've created transparency through our governance process. I have also made sure that we keep with our council goals that we put together every year. We had a successful community center expansion. We have a AAA bond rating, and we are giving our community a tax cut this year. So I feel like I have done my due diligence in the last 5 years. Thank you.
Mr. Harden.
All right, I'm not polished by any means, as you know. I do love chocolate cookies. I am tall, dark, and handsome. I want less spending, helping small businesses achieve where they want to go, affordable housing that's not subsidized, less government, common sense spending, free market, not government growth, diversity and unity. I grew up in a small white town, our small town in Wisconsin that was all white. My dad owned a restaurant. We were the only minority family in that town. There were probably 1,500 people. I learned what it was like to be called names, but I overcome that, to learn to love people and to work with unity. I feel like that's what we need on the council, is diversity and unity.
Mr. Sorenberger.
I happen to be old, short, and fat, so I've got some years under my belt. Undoubtedly, the passion of all the candidates here tonight is very admirable. But in reality, is that what's going to bring us into the future? At the risk of being cliche, I would say that to secure our future is going to require skills and leadership and vision. And if that resonates with you, I would consider your vote and appreciate it. Thank you.
Ms. Brennan.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for coming today. I remember the last time this forum happened, I was sitting out in the audience, and I'm so privileged to be standing up here in front of you today and talking to you. I want to let you know that our city is not broken, and it does not need fixed. And our city is not sick, and we do not need a cure. We are a strong and vibrant community, and we are moving forward. And I think I have the skills and the knowledge to help us go into the future. I hope that you vote on November 6th for me, of course, because I'm city council ready, and I'm ready to step in and start working on day one. Thank you.
Mr. McGarr.
I'm a relative newcomer to the city of Shakopee. I've lived all over the western United States, and one thing I want to let you know is every community I've ever lived in, from Phoenix, Arizona, to Wenatchee, Washington, to Denver, Colorado, is selfless service. I have served every community I've ever lived in, and I've done so from the day I arrived. That's even true here in Shakopee. The moment I arrived, I got involved in our local storm spotting program here and continued to serve our community from the day in and day out. My goal and the lens that I look at everything that I want to do on city council is to help this community thrive. There's a lot of potential here. Shakopee is a vibrant community brimming with potential, and I get to see that in the halls of Red Oak Elementary where I work every day. And I think if we just have the right leadership in office, we can see that potential come through, and we can really have a city that we're really proud of to call home.
Ms. Contreras.
First of all, thank you, Pastor O'Neill, River Valley, and the Chamber, and everyone who came out tonight to see this. 20 years ago, my husband and I arrived here in Shakopee, and we were welcomed with open arms. Today, things have, in some way changed the last couple of years. And running this election, I've gone through, some doors, and I've been very welcome and said, it's amazing that a diverse woman is running, and there's so much that you could do, and they're proud. But on the other side, I've seen other things, and unfortunately, that's not what we want, Shakopee deserves better, just, because I'm not going to generalize, it's not everybody. Shakopee does deserve better. Shakopee can be better. And I just say that November 6th, I ask you to pick 2 candidates who will show respect, dignity, and will be role models for our kids. And, just want to say that Shakopee, my name is Angelica Contreras, and my time has come.
Mr. Fox.
So the ancient Spartans wouldn't fault a warrior for losing a helmet, but they'd exile him for losing a shield. Because while a helmet is important to protecting yourself, a shield is essential to protecting those around you. I'm not an accountant, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a politician, and I'm not a Spartan either for that matter. I'm a problem solver, but I can't stand up here and tell you I'm going to fix all your problems, because the problems we face are bigger than any one promise or any one person or any one platform. Every one of us has a say in our future, and it's by becoming informed citizens and voting, and by becoming involved citizens and running for office, and even just being good people to those in need and having a hard time, is how all of us ensure Shakopee has a bright future. This isn't about me or any one of us, it's about all of us together. I want to thank my fellow candidates for raising their own shields and standing up for those around them. And I want to thank all of you and the people watching at home for being invested in your community. Have a great night and get out and vote.
As we close this part of our discussion, please remember that the views expressed in tonight's debate are those of the candidate, not those of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber sponsors this event as a service to our community and has gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure the objectivity of our forum this evening. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate. Instead, we seek to provide the businesses and voters of Shakopee with the information you need to make informed choices when you vote. Thank you to our audience this evening. Thank you to River Valley Church for hosting our event. And on behalf of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau, thank you to all of our candidates. We appreciate your time and your service to our community. Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. Please remember to vote. We'll now take a brief intermission while we prepare for our mayoral candidates. Thank you and good night. Good evening and welcome to the 2018 Shakopee Mayoral Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. We're gathered together this evening at River Valley Church's Shakopee campus. My name is Rob O'Neill. I'm the pastor of Resonate Community Church in Shakopee and a member of the Chamber's Public Policy Committee. I will serve as tonight's moderator. All of the candidates for Shakopee's mayor were invited to participate. With us this evening are Mr. Joseph Ditto, Councilor Mike Luce, Mayor Bill Mars, and Mr. Jeffrey Tom. Mr. William Strunk declined to participate this evening. Would you welcome our candidates now, please? Our candidates tonight are arranged in alphabetical order. Candidates have already recorded videos of themselves introducing themselves to the community, and you can see those online. So our candidates will not make opening statements this evening. I encourage you to watch their videos. Tonight, candidates will be asked a series of questions. For most questions, they will have 60 seconds to respond. If it's not 60 seconds, it'll be noted. They'll have 2 opportunities to make rebuttal comments of up to 30 seconds each, and as moderator, I am allowed to ask follow-up questions, in which case candidates will have 30 seconds to follow up. Our first question this evening is, Envision Shakopee's number 2 priority was rediscover the river. Do you share this vision, and how would you make it a priority? Candidates will have 60 seconds to respond. Envision Shakopee's number 2 priority was rediscover the river. Do you share this vision, and how will you make it a priority? Mr. Ditto, will begin with you.
Thanks, Rob, and I'd like to thank the Chamber for having me today. I love this question. I love the riverfront. My vision for the riverfront in Shakopee looks a lot like the Riverwalk in San Antonio. So how do we get to a beautiful place like that? We do it through free market organic growth. Shakopee is an awesome city. People are moving here in droves. People want to invest here in Shakopee. We've had some problems recently where we've thrown gasoline on that fire by using taxpayer-funded growth, completely unnecessary given what a great city we are. I look forward to improving the riverfront using organic growth. Thank you.
Councilor Luce, Envision Shakopee's number 2 priority was rediscover the river. Do you share this vision, and how would you make it a priority?
I believe the river presents a lot of problems to develop it. As we all know, anybody that lives in Shakopee, the river floods just about every year, if not more than once a year. So that would be something we'd have to deal with, because anything you put there, you got to make sure it's going to withstand a flood or be able to be moved out of the flood zone. The cost of developing down there is going to be very expensive. Like I said, the river's unpredictable. And I would like to see it developed, but along with Mr. Ditto's idea of using the market to bring it to fruition, I think it could be a partnership, but I think the city doesn't need to be the leader of the pack. Let somebody else come to us. We can make some plans, but we don't need to be in front and funding it.
Mayor Mars, Envision Shakopee's number 2 priority was rediscover the river. Do you share this vision, and how would you make it a priority?
Well, thank you. Actually, 20 years ago, I had an idea of take back the river. The old Huber Park was our community focal point and not being utilized to its full and best extent. So we built a community-built playground that was fully funded. And a couple years later, the city came through with an amphitheater and parking lots and investments into our community, into the riverfront. I remember the day we opened Huber Park, and a former mayor mentioned that as the people faced the river, listening to him on the amphitheater said, look, we are now facing the river instead of years and decades turning our back on the river. I would love to continue that, to invest into our community, the riverfront. Every community does it. I think Shakopee should do it. We will have to find a way to pay for it, but I think there are certainly some great opportunities to bring back the riverfront.
Mr. Tom, Envision Shakopee's number 2 priority was rediscover the river. Do you share this vision, and how would you make it a priority?
I do share this vision, but there are ways to go about doing it. First of all, we can't take taxpayer money and pay for this. We need to find investors that want to invest in this city. Part of the problem with investors coming in is there's no rhyme or reason to how we do business in this city. We need to have a set way of how we do things and how we bring investors in and treat everyone the same. The river is a great area. Like Mayor Mars stated, the Huber Park is a great spot for the community to go hang out, have festivals, listen to bands. The community should enjoy this area, but taxpayers shouldn't have to fund this project. There's plenty of private investors that want to come into this city and can fund these things for us. Thanks.
Candidates, question number 2 deals with downtown. Do you find Shakopee's downtown to be economically viable and inviting? And what more needs to be done? Councilor Luce, you'll have 60 seconds and we'll begin with you. Do you find Shakopee's downtown to be economically viable and inviting? And what more needs to be done?
I think our downtown is doing fairly well. We just put a $2 million infusion into it. It looks a whole lot better than it did, and people are finding out where it's at. I do believe at some point in time the downtown has to stand on its own 2 feet. We've been helping it out year after year with funding. Right now, if you look at your next tax statement, there's going to be a separate line item just for downtown, and that money will only be spent in downtown. The housing project that we've got coming on the old City Hall site, I believe is the last straw of what we can do to help out downtown, because we've tried many things and housing is the one thing we haven't tried. So I believe housing would, everybody says we need people. Well, you're going to have people here pretty soon. So if that doesn't work, maybe it is what it is.
Mayor Mars, do you find Shakopee's downtown to be economically viable and inviting? And what more needs to be done?
Yes, I believe our downtown is vibrant and full of life, much like I haven't seen in 15 to 20 years. There has been incremental investments, and as Councilor said, we did invest $2 million in infrastructure. It does. It improved our downtown. Actually, Envision Shakopee had one of those 12 bold ideas of creating public spaces. We did that. Matter of fact, Rhythm on the Rails, Farmers Market is using that. There is more opportunity to the west end of Shakopee, or west end of downtown. Somehow you can tie that and take that energy to the river. You know, we've had a couple festivals here in town, or things that are Pumpkins in the Park and Envision Shakopee. I've talked to a lot of people. Some of those people, the folks that come to that, are not from our community. They come to our community because their community doesn't. That's exactly what you want.
Mr. Tom, do you find Shakopee's downtown to be economically viable and inviting? And what more needs to be done?
It is inviting because we do have roads that go to downtown. I've talked to several business owners down there, and they've seen a lot of change over the years of how downtown looks. You see all the retail shops are gone. We just have a lot of businesses there. There are some retail, but not as many as there used to be. They talked about the days of sidewalk sales and bringing their racks out onto the road, and the city streets were filled with people. Let's bring that back to Shakopee. Let's help these people out, help the businesses downtown. If we need to expand downtown, redo downtown, something like that. But again, we don't use taxpayer money for this. We get investments from outside sources. We work with the business people in the city and work with them. We're not working with the city business owners right now. We need to work closely with them and make sure that they are provided what they need to become successful and redo downtown.
Mr. Ditto, do you find Shakopee's downtown to be economically viable and inviting? And what more needs to be done?
I actually love our downtown area. I spend a lot of time down there. I eat lunch at Turtles and O'Brien's at least once a week. I think we need to actively promote our great downtown area. I don't think we need taxpayer subsidies for the downtown area. I know that's been a big area of focus for the current administration, but frankly, transactions are best when they're voluntary. Taxation is not a voluntary transaction. So if the downtown business owners really think that they need taxpayer funding in order to be successful, I would propose a special taxation district on the downtown areas so they fund themselves. We've got struggling families in our community. We've got folks on fixed incomes. These folks don't want to be directly subsidizing downtown businesses. They might have other priorities for their money, for their families, for their children. So I'm against the taxpayer funding of downtown.
Candidates, is it important for the Shakopee business community to grow right now? And what should be the role of city government in helping the business community to grow? You'll have 60 seconds for this question, and we'll begin with Mayor Mars. Is it important for the Shakopee business community to grow right now? And what should be the role of city government in helping the business community to grow?
Well, I think our community is growing, and its business industrial base is growing by leaps and bounds. Some 80 businesses have either come to our community or expanded just in the last several years. I think government's role should be limited only in certain circumstances. We did offer tax increment financing. It's a tool in our toolboxes. As I mentioned, some 80 businesses have either expanded or come to our community. We have used this just a handful of times over the last many years. But as a community, you want to grow your tax base. We are Shakopee has a phenomenal business industrial force that is almost recession-proof. We're not tied to one industry. We should be very thankful for that. Some communities don't have any of that, and a couple of our neighbors. Shakopee should be proud of our business community.
Mr. Tom, is it important for the Shakopee business community to grow right now? And what should be the role of city government in helping the business community to grow?
The short answer to that is yes. We need businesses in Shakopee. That is our strong base. How we do it now is not the way to do it. Tax increment financing, like Mayor Mars stated, is a tool. It's a tool that is used, when used correctly, is a great thing. We don't have the high-paying jobs here. You can't live in Shakopee and work in this town. People make $21,000 more on average leaving this city to go work. That's not something we can have. We don't have the young children coming to this town, which keeps our schools going and keeps the town young. The mid-20s to mid-30s aren't moving into this town. That's a direct result of housing. You need to think about housing for different levels, not just the high end. We need the higher paying jobs, and we need to finance them correctly. If you bring the high paying jobs, the city will help you out. If you don't bring the high paying jobs, we don't have room for you then.
Mr. Ditto, is it important for the Shakopee business community to grow right now? And what should be the role of city government in helping the business community to grow?
Thanks, Rob. It's a great question. I am aggressively pro free market growth. Shakopee is a great place to live, great place to work. We have tons of room for growth. There's a lot of businesses that are coming to town, and there's a lot of development going on right now that is not taxpayer subsidized. Recent taxpayer subsidies were extremely disappointing to me. I don't feel like those businesses are really investing in the community. Our free market developers are paying for their own roads, they're paying for their own infrastructure, sewers, and then they turn those over to the city to maintain, and they start paying taxes on day one. These other folks are investing in their own property, and then they're using their tax increments to pay off the infrastructure later on instead of paying taxes into the treasury like the free market folks. I would encourage businesses to come to town by reducing zoning restrictions, reducing regulations, reducing rules and restrictions to make Shakopee a business-friendly town again.
Councilor Luce, is it important for the Shakopee business community to grow right now? And what should be the role of city government in helping the business community to grow?
I believe the Dorn housing development is the one greatest thing we can do to grow Shakopee businesses. Businesses have been screaming for a high-end housing for their executives. We are going to give it to them. They are now going to have high-end housing that their executives won't be looking for other places to go to live and to find a job. They will stay here. Right now, Canterbury is paying $1 million in taxes for the property that sits there vacant per year. In 11 years, when that TIF comes off, and that's what it's scheduled to be if all the numbers work out, that plot of land will pay $16 million to our economy. That's divided by 3, well, actually divided by 4 with fiscal disparities. But think what our school district, our city, and our county can do with that kind of money. That will be unbelievable when it turns in our favor. Thank you.
Candidates, several of you have mentioned housing. Employers consistently report that housing is not available for their employees in Shakopee. How do we meet the increasingly varied housing needs in Shakopee? Mr. Tom, we will begin with you. Employers consistently report that housing is not available for their employees in Shakopee. How do we meet the increasingly varied needs for housing in Shakopee?
First of all, you have to look at what kind of jobs we have in Shakopee. Kind of like with the last question I answered. We don't have the high-paying jobs here. We don't have the corporate jobs in Shakopee. So if we move forward and bring those corporate jobs in, our housing right now is great. As you look at the lower end of jobs, and you need to have housing for the people that make less than the corporate money. We don't have that in Shakopee. We need to develop a plan, work with developers, talk to people, work with the county, work with the state. Right now, we're just working as a city on this problem, and it's a bigger problem than that. Our surrounding communities are involved in this problem as well. If we all work together, there is a plan we can develop. It might be that we use some TIF to get roads built so we can develop more land out on the west side of town. That'd be one way that TIF would work and would help out the community in a great way.
Mr. Ditto, how do we meet the increasingly varied housing needs in Shakopee?
I agree that lack of housing, and especially lack of affordable housing, is a problem in Shakopee right now. There's a reason for that. There's a law against building affordable housing. We don't need government subsidized housing. What we need to do is relax the government restrictions that are in place to building affordable homes. I know when I moved out on my own, I started out in a mobile home, right? I got a small loan, like a car loan. You paid it off in 4 or 5 years, and then you were able to sell that and have a down payment to purchase a larger home. I would support tiny homes and backyards for aging relatives or younger kids that are moving out on their own. To start out, I would reduce zoning regulations, relax building codes so that it's easier to build affordable housing in Shakopee.
Councilor Luce, how do we meet the increasingly varied housing needs in Shakopee?
Well, as I answered the last question, the Dorn development's going to provide us with 700 or so units that a lot of people from town here are probably going to move into because they want to step up into a high-end housing and they want to get out from underneath a house. The homes that they leave will be backfilled by new people, and the homes that those people leave will be also filled with other people. So it's just I would love to be a realtor in town here in the next couple of years because they are going to have a field day with selling houses. How do you build affordable housing? First, we have to define affordable housing. Everybody's affordability is different. We talked about, or one of the candidates talked about tiny homes. I wouldn't be in favor of them. That came before council, and I don't believe in backyard, but I do believe we could cluster them somewhere, and it would possibly work.
Mayor Mars, how do we meet the increasingly varied housing needs in Shakopee?
I think we already are. I think Shakopee has a wide variety of housing up and down the scale from our older community housing. I think 44% of all the housing in Shakopee, the units, are at $250,000 or less. I don't know. Define affordable housing? We have townhomes, we have apartments, we have single-family homes. There's a lot of stock. Actually, we've added over 100 units of affordable housing with 2 developments that are breaking ground that'll come online. I believe there's been a pent-up demand. The marketplace has stalled out. We just came off a recession. Currently, Shakopee has about 1,500 units in the pipeline for over the next several years. I believe that will relieve some of the pressure rather than these houses being sold in 4 days and bidding up the prices.
Candidates, for the next question, you'll have 30 seconds to respond. And the question will be, what areas of city spending are out of control? What areas of city spending are out of control? You'll have 30 seconds to respond. Mr. Ditto, we'll begin with you.
Thanks, Rob. I think there are several areas that are in control, first of all. I would not cut the police. I would not cut fire. I would not cut road or park maintenance. Areas where I would be willing to cut are economic development. Again, Shakopee's a great place to live. We don't need to bribe people to come here. And there's probably some efficiencies that we can improve on within the intergovernment workings as well.
Councilor Luce, what areas of city spending are out of control?
Well, I voted against the community center, and I do believe the community center is costing us way too much. According to the books, it's not, but if we were charging the rent that we charge on the rest of our buildings at 100% on the community center would be costing us over $2 million a year. And I believe for the amount of people using it, that was not a really good investment. It's better than I thought, but it's still not good.
Mayor Mars, what areas of city spending are out of control?
Well, we've already actually been working on that. One of the areas when I took office, the Park and Rec Department, we all love our Park and Rec and our services, but it was some 22% of our budget. That number today for 2019 is 16%. And that's a function of raising some rates at our brand new fancy community center, which is great, and also finding efficiencies and scales of economy on the expense side and driving that down.
Mr. Tom, what areas of city spending are out of control?
Taking out a $29 million bond and paying it back over however many years and owing $44 million, that's out of control. We need to save money better and not take out bonds and just keep taking them out to keep paying. As far as other numbers for city exact, I'd sit down and with all the leaders of each department in the city, and we go over everything they spend money on and figure out if we can cut something or if we can't.
Again, for this question, you're going to have 30 seconds to respond. The question is, what role should partisan politics play in the city level of government? Councilor Luce, we're going to begin with you. 30 seconds. What role should partisan politics play in the city level of government?
Currently, I believe partisan politics plays way too much of a role in our city government. It should play no role. It should be apolitical. We shouldn't have one side biting the other one constantly and vice versa. I believe that's what's driven the majority of the discord on our council is the infighting because of that.
Mayor Mars, what role should partisan politics play in the city level of government?
Absolutely none. Actually, the reason I've led and been involved in our community from day one for almost 30 years has been that it's apolitical. It's about us, the residents, doing what's best in the interest of Shakopee long term. I mean, we stand here with a candidate that's chairman of the Scott County GOP. How closer can you get? I say no to party politics.
Mr. Tom, what role should partisan politics play in the city level of government?
I agree with Mayor Mars. Pretty much dead on. You can't have politics in nonpartisan positions. We're up here to serve the people, listen to the people, do what's best for the city. We can't be forced one side or the other. And like you said, we have a candidate up here that's the Scott County GOP head of it. And that's party politics at its best.
Mr. Ditto, what role should partisan politics play in the city level of government?
I'm not feeling the love up here, guys. I'm going to ditto everything these guys said. I also don't think there should be a role for partisan politics in local government. Look, I'm a Republican. I'm a limited government conservative. I care a lot about the community, and the best way for me to promote my views was to volunteer with the Republican Party. I'm the chairman of the local party. It's a volunteer position for which I receive no compensation. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm a limited government conservative.
Candidates, for this question, you'll have 60 seconds to respond. What new transportation ideas would you support to help relieve congestion long-term for those who prefer to use vehicles for daily transportation? 60 seconds. What new transportation ideas would you support to help relieve congestion long-term for those who prefer to use vehicles for daily transportation? Mayor Mars, we're going to begin with you.
Transportation. I'm a commuter up and down 169 every day. I live it. My wife is a commuter and takes the bus every day. One of the best things we can do is actually get the jobs here, the style of house, variety of housings, and keep our residents here right in town. I have asked city staff for a helicopter, and that appropriation has been declined, so we are saving money there. But I think transportation, I take 169, people talk about it. You know, we're pulling people from Jordan. We're pulling people from Belle Plaine that are coming up. So when you look at the impact, oh, Shakopee, we're just one small piece of it. I believe our commuter bus service in town is excellent. You can go from downtown around to Hy-Vee to Cub, out to Southbridge. Those commuter buses will improve as we move forward.
Mr. Tom, what new transportation ideas would you support to help relieve congestion long-term for those who prefer to use vehicles for daily transportation?
Well, if you want to commute every day, you're going to have to sit in traffic. There's no way around that. There's always going to be congestion. Ways we can help is building up our infrastructure, building up our roads. Look at Marshall Road. If you drive down there between 5, 6 o'clock at night, you're going to sit there. You're going to sit at stoplights. You're going to be backed up. There's a lot of construction going on, but it's not making the improvements that we need. You need to add extra lanes. I know people don't like roundabouts, and there's a lot of complaints about them, but roundabouts are a great thing. If people use them correctly, they do work. Just building up our infrastructure, and if people want to commute, they can continue to commute, hopefully without the delay they're seeing, and bringing the jobs here to Shakopee, bringing those high-paying jobs that people want here so they can live here and work in the same town.
Mr. Ditto, what new transportation ideas would you support to help relieve congestion long-term for those who prefer to use vehicles for daily transportation?
Thanks, Rob. You know, during this campaign, I've knocked on thousands of doors, and that is the #1 concern I've been hearing from people. We need lanes, not trains. So for all the bemoaning people do about my political contacts, sometimes it helps. Getting more lanes on 169 is going to require coordination between federal, state, and local authorities. Congressman Lewis is a friend of mine. Governor candidate Jeff Johnson is a friend of mine. Those folks will answer the phone when I call, and it's important that we have those contacts as a city to work together. I would support an immediate restriping to temporarily relieve congestion on 169, followed by aggressively pursuing a permanent widening of 169 to allow for more traffic.
Councilor Luce, what new transportation ideas would you support to help relieve congestion long-term for those who prefer to use vehicles for daily transportation?
Well, I believe one of the alternatives that's already in the works is the 41-169 river crossing. That's going to help considerably. 169 going north it's a lost cause, I believe. I mean, there's not enough money in the world to fix that. You'd have to widen the bridge, widen it all the way up through Eden Prairie. I think the best thing we can do is better jobs, better housing, keep the people here and keep them from crossing the river. That's the whole mantra that I would say is keep them here one way or the other. We got to find the jobs and we got to provide the housing. We're trying to do both right now, and I think we're doing a pretty fair job. Like I said before, people are going to be surprised when they see that housing up at Canterbury Commons. They will not believe the type that is coming. Thank you.
Well, our time is running out. If you've not had your questions answered this evening, you should ask the candidates before they leave after our debate or contact their campaign office. You can find out more about our candidates also as well at the Chamber's website, shakopee.org. Each candidate will now have 1 minute to make closing statements, and we will begin with Councilor Luce. Councilor Luce, 1 minute.
I'm a lifelong a resident of Shakopee. I was born here. I love Shakopee. I ran for council 3 times and I finally won. I've got to tell you a funny story. The day I won, my son called me early in the morning and it had snowed that night. He said, look out the window, and I looked and I said, okay, so it snowed. He says, it looked like hell froze over. Nobody thought I could do it. Well, I did it. Well, I'm trying to be your mayor. Nobody thinks I can do it. I believe I can. I think I've proven it over the 5 years that I've served on council. I will diligently do the background work and investigate every project that comes through. And I have done it. I will do it. I will continue doing it. And I believe we've come up with some very good alternatives because of what I've come up with. I ask all the questions and we get answers. So thank you, and I hope you vote for me on November 6th.
Mr. Ditto, 60 seconds.
Thanks again, Rob. And once again, I'd like to thank the Chamber. I've watched this event in the past. You always do a great job, and I really appreciate the hospitality. I thank all of you for coming. So I've been in Shakopee for 17 years. I live with my daughter, Destiny, who's 8. She's a 3rd grader at Saks. We absolutely love it here. We're invested in this town. I own several rental properties. We're not going anywhere. I'm the conservative in this race. Every one of these gentlemen on stage has expressed some support for tax increment financing in one degree or another. I do not. I'm against hyper growth. You talk about traffic. What's going to make traffic worth? Hyper growth, okay? Taxpayers subsidized gated communities. You won't get any more of that out of me. I humbly seek your vote on November 6th. Thank you very much.
Mr. Tom, 60 seconds.
First off, thank you for everyone coming and watching. It's important that you're informed on who's running and what they stand for. I'm not a politician. I never will be. I don't get involved in politics really that much. Why I ran is because of the TIF project that was passed at Canterbury. There's no reason for Canterbury to come in front of the city council and say, we don't need this, but it's great if you give it to us. That's not how this city should be run. We shouldn't be handing out money to corporations that have the money to fund their own projects. I want to be a voice for the people, listen to your ideas, and do what you guys want. I'm nonpartisan. Have a great outlook for the future. The city is great. We can make it even better. Bring the high-paying jobs here. Use TIF correctly to bring those high-paying jobs here. If they're not bringing the high-paying jobs, you don't get the TIF.
Mayor Mars.
Thank you very much, Rob and Chamber and residents for this event tonight. This was great. Shakopee's a great community. Our best days lie ahead of us. I would like to continue to lead our community as I have in the past. 3 years ago, I stood on this stage and I told you a little story about a movie called Dave. Kevin Kline was in there. He was president of the United States. And he talked about that when he was talking to a rally, said, I should really care more about you than me. We were facing our new community center with $30 million, and I told you that I would care more about you than me. 3 years later, I stand here today, and I've kept that in my mind. We've integrated the community center debt, we've expanded our community, we've invested, and today we stand with a tax cut. I have done the job, and I'd like to continue. Thank you.
As we close this part of our discussion, please remember that the views expressed in tonight's debate are those of the candidates, not of the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber sponsors this event as a service to the community and goes to extraordinary lengths to ensure the objectivity of this forum. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate. Instead, we seek to provide the businesses and the voters of Shakopee with the information you need to make informed choices when you vote. Thank you to members of our audience this evening for your participation. Thank you to River Valley Church, our hosts this night. And on behalf of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau, thank you to all of our candidates. We appreciate so much your time and your service to our community. Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. Please remember to vote. We'll now take a brief intermission as we prepare for our candidates for Scott County Sheriff, though. Please welcome Becky Ribich, who has an introduction to make. For me, thank you and good night. Good evening and welcome to the 2018 Scott County Sheriff Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. We're together this evening at River Valley Church's Shakopee campus. My name is Rob O'Neill. I'm the pastor of Resonate Community Church and a member of the Chamber's Public Policy Committee, and I will be the moderator for tonight's session. All candidates for Shakopee or for Scott County Sheriff were invited to participate. With us this evening are Commander Jason Aris and Sheriff Luke Hennon. Would you welcome them for me, please? Our candidates are arranged in alphabetical order. Candidates have already recorded video interviews to introduce themselves to the community, and you can see those online, so our candidates will not make opening statements this evening. I encourage you to watch their videos. Tonight, candidates will be asked a series of questions. They will have 60 seconds to respond to each question. They'll have 2 opportunities to make rebuttal comments for 30 seconds each. As moderator, I'm allowed to ask follow-up questions, in which case the candidates will have 30 seconds to respond. Our first question, like all of them this evening, will be 60 seconds. Candidates, in your opinion, which aspect of the sheriff's job description is the most important? Commander Aris will begin with you. 60 seconds to answer. In your opinion, which aspect of the sheriff's job description is the most important?
I think without a shadow of a doubt, it needs to be out with the people, out with the employees. Getting to know your community and finding the needs of our community is essential. knowing the needs of the employees, giving them the tools, the education, experience to be successful. That's what leadership is. Like John C. Maxwell says, you can't have a, excuse me, you need a vision and a leader. You need a vision and a leader. And by knowing your community, your employees, and finding the direction where we need to go, I look forward to taking on that challenge as the sheriff of Scott County, tapping into the resources of our community, tapping into ideas into our employees to enhance the service. I look forward to that challenge.
Sheriff Hennon, in your opinion, which aspect of the sheriff's job description is the most important?
I would say it would be relationships. I spent 21 years working at the county in the sheriff's office building relationships, and that's why I'm getting things done and accomplished today. You have to know how to work with your staff. I've worked alongside them both in the jail, as a deputy, as a detective, as a sergeant, as a chief deputy, and now as a sheriff, overseeing our dispatch center and our jail. You have those relationships, but you also have to have outside relationships, working with township boards and city councils, as well as our own county board. For a sheriff to get things done needs those relationships, needs those people on his team or her team to make the accomplishments happen. And you can see in the past couple of years the relationships I've built and the accomplishments we've made. Working alongside county staff and our local legislative representatives, we obtained $1.9 million for mental health in our community to get a mental health bed facility. We have a new mobile mental health crisis unit working in Scott County now because of relationships, working on boards and committees along with the citizens to make it happen.
Candidates, what is the #1 law enforcement issue facing Scott County right now? Sheriff Hennon, we'll begin with you. What is the #1 law enforcement issue facing Scott County right now?
The #1 issue facing Scott County right now in law enforcement is mental illness. There's a lack of resources in our communities that have pushed law enforcement to be on the front edge to make decisions and have to tackle this problem, and we're not the right people. Our 911 dispatchers, our deputies, our police officers in the communities, as well as our jail is not the appropriate place to be dealing with these issues. I've been working hard to attack that issue and to find better resources, and like I previously mentioned, bringing in a mental health mobile crisis unit to get resources to people before they need to call the police, and after they've had some type of crisis to get them stabilized. And that is what we've been working on to accomplish. And that's also a way to save taxpayers money, putting resources and money where the actual problem is. Not hiring more officers, not building or expanding staff in a jail to make that happen, but putting the resources where the actual problem is. And it's the most humane and appropriate way to treat our citizens.
Commander Harris, what is the #1 law enforcement issue facing Scott County right now?
I'm going to agree with part of that, but there's the addiction problem with drugs too. I mean, I see it first, right on the front lines. I see families being completely destroyed by drugs. It's absolutely sad what we're seeing. And to know that people are addicted to drugs because of mental health is something we have to continue as a community work towards. We can't have Scott County Jail being the biggest mental health and treatment facility. I take great pride in being an instructor at Rasmussen College, teaching crisis intervention to young candidates, to know that there's an opportunity to learn other things by educating themselves, to identify problems. So use of force isn't used on people with mental health issues. I look forward in partnering and continuing and educating our employees and the community.
Candidates, would you describe your experience in managing budgets, including the name of the entity, the size of the budget, and your management responsibilities? We'll begin this question with Commander Harris. Describe your experience, please, in managing budgets.
Well, right now I've been coming up on 3 years being a commander of the Southwest Metro Drug Task Force. Our budget is just shy of $1 million. The nice thing about that budget is I've been able to implement increased staff, increase our grant funding to manage that budget. So by doing all that, it hasn't increased our budget, and it hasn't cost the taxpayers any money or the membership dues for those who contribute.
Sheriff Hennon, would you describe your experience in managing budgets?
Yes, my experience in managing budgets would be with Scott County and the Sheriff's Office. Our budget this year is $15.9 million. And I've managed a budget for the Sheriff's Office for the past, going on the 3rd year now. And that's a large budget, but it also encompasses many areas. It covers a dispatch center that you have to manage, phone systems, radio systems, all the technology behind it, in addition to the staff and the hours that need to get put in to get the job done. It includes a county jail, which accounts for about 40% of my budget. A jail that I have experience working in when I first started my career, and now I manage it and effectively keep that budget in line, as well as all the other aspects such as patrol, emergency management, and working with my team of captains that oversee these budgets, and we manage them throughout the year, planning and implementing the needs and the need of the taxpayers to keep that levy increases low and sustainable. I also oversee the Drug Task Force budget as part of the executive board and the Tri-City Tactical Team's budget as part of that board.
What steps, candidates, would you take to prevent or minimize racial tension between law enforcement and residents or visitors? Sheriff Hennon, we'll begin with you. What steps would you take to prevent or minimize racial tension between law enforcement and residents or visitors?
Yes, that's something I took on early on when I became sheriff. 2 years ago, I took one of our deputies and made a special assignment called community engagement. And we put that deputy, in addition to her normal duties, we put her out in the community to build relationships and trust. And that all ties into the legitimacy of law enforcement and putting off a problem that could happen tomorrow. We may have trust today, but if we don't work hard on that relationship daily, weekly, monthly, there would be a problem in our community on the next use of force incident, the next arrest that goes bad, or even a police shooting. So we put energy into that. We also put energy into getting the rest of our deputies involved. You'll see us on the front page of the local paper a few months ago playing soccer with kids. You see us doing events in the community to get families together, kids together, to join us and to get to know us. And that's about building relationships. And the other aspect of that, of preventing these issues, is training. We've done a lot of training. We've brought in implicit bias training, other areas that help our deputies and all of our staff learn about issues out there to make them make better decisions, be better leaders in the community.
Commander Harris, what steps would you take to prevent or minimize racial tension between law enforcement and residents or visitors?
Man, without a shadow of doubt, is engaging before anything happens. Getting to know your community. I've been blessed to be part of such a diverse community in Shakopee. I've had the opportunity to grow with them and to think that I've been able to be exposed to them and make them not only know me as a police officer, but know my family. And that's so important for them to know me and build that trust, not when I'm a police officer, but when we're there on a weekend or some festival, to be so engaged in that. I'm part of an ADAM board. It's called the Association of Training Officers in Minnesota, and we put on implicit bias training. I recently have been endorsed by the National Latino Police Officer Association. Looking forward to building those relationships and into the sheriff's office. I look forward to it.
Candidates, operating the jail is a large part of the sheriff's job. What would you change about current jail operations and why? Commander Harris, we'll begin with you.
Well, we always have to remain within our best practices. And I think the biggest current thing that we have to do is retain our employees. I mean, if you think about it, if we're able to retain our employees, we're able to save money. That's taxpayer money. Less money training them. You get to increase the safety of the jailers. And also with the jail is training. You have to keep your experience, to keep your training on the front line. These people, these corrections officers are just as equal as anyone, and I commend their job.
Sheriff Hennon, what would you change about jail operations and why?
What I would change about the jail operations is continuing to work to keep our corrections officers, our individuals in uniforms, doing those tasks. And what I've done over the last couple of years is implemented new staff and new changes to do that. Because the more they get tied up on other issues, the less ability they have to do their job. So we've increased nursing staff in the jail in the last 2 years to better provide for the inmates and spend less time in the corrections officers dealing with that. Bringing in mental health services like we've previously discussed to give the corrections officers more time to do their job, maintaining the safety of the jail and not spending time trying to work with somebody that's in a mental health crisis, getting professionals in there to do that. So we keep working on bringing those added additional staff in to get the job done right, and that allows the staff to do their job, but also improves public safety. They do a more efficient job. That means the officer on the street coming in to book somebody gets in and out quicker. It means the courts operate quicker if we keep those resources there to assigned.
Candidates, what is the role of Scott County and the Sheriff's Department in enforcing immigration law? This will be a 60-second question. What is the role of Scott County and the Sheriff's Department in enforcing immigration law? Sheriff Hennon, we'll begin with you.
All right. This answer obviously is very complicated and political for many people, but really the role of the sheriff is you uphold the Constitution of the state and federal, or state and U.S. Constitution. You enforce laws of state and federal, so you cooperate as required by that, and I've done that for the past 2 years, and I'll continue to do that.
Commander Harris, what is the role of Scott County and the Sheriff's Department in enforcing immigration law?
I'd have to duplicate exactly what you said, but there's one thing that I see a lot, and I would say we agreed to see a lot of the same questions with regards to this, is not to have people live in fear, though. You know, there's a lot of times that this question's such a hot button, and that's why it's so important to be engaged with our community, to not have people live in fear.
Candidates, this will be our last question this evening. What would you change in your first month as sheriff, and how would you go about doing it? And Commander Harris, we'll begin with you. What would you change in your first month as sheriff, and how would you go about doing it?
I would definitely increase active participation within our public safety leaders. I see a lot of opportunities for us to enhance those relationships and those partnerships, because we need to be a unit. We need to be as a team and work together for the betterment of our community. There's so many different ideas and perspectives out there that our public safety officials have for us, and it's for us to be the tip of the spear, the out front, and I intend to do that as the Sheriff of Scott County, being out front with our public safety officials and enhancing those relationships and partnerships.
Sheriff Hennon, what would you change in your first month as re-elected sheriff, and how would you go about doing it?
I think I would do similar to what I did after our primary election. I met with the other candidates and talked to them about some of the issues they had raised and their concerns, and I learned from that. We all learned from everything, and I know I would meet with Jason as well, and we would learn from each other, and I would be happy to take some of those ideas forward as we make our community more safe.
Our time is running out. Anyone whose questions have not been answered so far this evening should ask the candidates before they leave tonight, or contact their campaign offices. You can also find out more about all of our candidates at the Chamber's website, shakopee.org. Each candidate is now going to have the opportunity to make a 1-minute closing statement, and we will begin with Commander Harris.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for your attendance. I've enjoyed this whole campaign. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know how to run for election, but I did know how to apply for a job. And that's exactly what I did. I tried to reach every part of Scott County and meet every last person that I could. Not so they can learn from me, but that I could learn from them. And I want people to go to the voting booth November 6th and look at the education, experience, training, and make that a factor in your vote. And I look forward to being the next sheriff of Scott County, and I put my resume online because I believe in my heart this is about the people. This is. I want you to hire me November 6th. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Sheriff Hennon, 1 minute for your closing statement.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you. Thank you for the opportunity that I've had to serve as your sheriff for the past 2.5 years. I'd also like to know that I'm thankful for the last 21 years I've had working at the sheriff's office, working alongside some of the most dedicated and professional deputies, dispatchers, corrections officers, support staff, and volunteers that make our sheriff's office great and in turn make our community great as well as safe. Our community demands experienced leadership to retain legitimacy and trust in law enforcement. I will meet that demand as I enhance public safety through innovation and collaboration. It's been a privilege to serve as your sheriff. Help me continue to build safe communities. I'm counting on your vote. Thank you.
As we close this part of our discussion this evening, allow me to remind you that the views expressed in tonight's debate are those of the candidates, not those of the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber sponsors this event as a service to the community and has gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure the objectivity of our forum. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate. Instead, we seek to provide the businesses and voters of Shakopee with the information you need in order to make an informed choice when you vote. Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. Please remember to vote. We'll now take a brief intermission as we prepare for our Scott County District 3 Commissioner Forum. Thank you and good night. Good evening and welcome to the 2018 Scott County District 3 Commissioners Forum, sponsored by the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. We're gathered together tonight at River Valley Church's Shakopee campus. My name is Rob O'Neill. I'm the pastor of Resonate Community Church and a member of the Chamber's Public Policy Committee. I'll serve as our moderator this evening. All of the candidates for Scott County District 3 Commissioner were invited to participate. With us this evening are Commissioner Mike Beard and Mr. Joe Wagner. Would you welcome them, please? Our candidates are arranged tonight in alphabetical order. Candidates have already recorded video interviews to introduce themselves to our community, and you can see those online, so our candidates will not be making opening statements this evening. I encourage you to watch their videos. Tonight, candidates will be asked a series of questions. They'll have 60 seconds to respond to each question. They'll also have 2 opportunities to make rebuttal comments for 30 seconds each. As moderator, I am allowed to ask follow-up questions, in which case the candidate will have 30 seconds to respond. Candidates, our first question this evening will be, what services should the county add, modify, or subtract? You'll have 60 seconds to respond. What services should the county add, modify, or subtract? Commissioner Beard, we'll begin with you.
Rob and members, first of all, thank you for having us here tonight. This is an enormous public service, particularly when we come from a county commissioner perspective, because we're not the flashy policymakers that some of the other positions are. We are an extension of the state, and almost everything we do is because the state orders us to do it. Whether it's run the court system, run the county roads, the welfare system, the jail, all that is an extension of the state's administrative purpose. That's why we have 87 counties, so everybody doesn't have to run to St. Paul. To that extent, we try to deliver those services as efficiently and effectively as possible. And for us to add, modify, or subtract for those, we're really constrained by the mandates we're required to fulfill. About the only thing we could add or subtract from would be the library hours and maybe the park service. And the citizens have told us they want the libraries open, they want the parks built out, and so I think it's steady as she goes because of the budget constraints of adding services that carry forward into the future.
Mr. Wagner, what services should the county add, modify, or subtract?
Again, to start off, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's a beautiful facility here. As for what the county, on the campaign trail, the most common question you get asked is, what exactly does a county commissioner do? And then you explain immediately it's the state mandates. It's about, 70-75% of what the county does is mandated by the state. If an individual comes into Scott County Human Services, and their in-kind guidelines show that they're qualified for the food supplement program or whatever. The state says you must supply that. And so, and again, what Commissioner Beard had said is it's the libraries and the parks. That really is about all the flexibility that we have as commissioners. Thank you.
Well, candidate, Scott County Public Health has identified teen mental health as a top health issue. According to the Minnesota Student Survey, more than 20% of ninth grade females have contemplated committing suicide within the last year. What more can Scott County do to help people with mental health issues? Mr. Wagner, we're going to begin with you. What more can Scott County do to help people with mental health issues?
Well, it's a huge issue, as the sheriff candidates were just talking about earlier. You know, I grew up and my oldest brother was mentally handicapped, and it's a very, for families, it's a very frustrating, incredibly frustrating situation. It's a form of helplessness or whatever. That's incredible. And as to what Scott County can do, I think we're doing the best we can with the funding that's available, with the human services that deal with it. Thank you.
Commissioner Beard, what more can Scott County do to help people with mental health issues?
First of all, folks, I want to differentiate between developmental disabilities, where we do some enormously impactful work through some of our development, adult daycare programs, and New Options is what I'm trying to think of, that program we work with there. The mental health issue is a little bit different. It's like a crisis kind of a thing that people get into. Without debating the causes of it, the fact of the matter is we find ourselves in more and more of it in today's culture and climate. To that end, we've worked with a group that's going to be based in Savage for, I think, 16 emergency beds for people who are in mental health crisis. So rather than park them at the emergency room or in the Scott County Jail, we can actually divert those folks into a program that actually we got $1.9 million from the state legislature to help with this program, which is kind of a demonstration project. So we got some things like that we can do, that we're expanding those services. And as you heard in the previous discussion with the sheriffs, they're sensitized and ready to act on this issue as well.
Scott County Public Health has also identified opioid use as a top health issue. How can Scott County help deal with this serious issue? How can Scott County help deal with the serious opioid issue? And Commissioner Beard, we'll begin with you.
Well, first of all, I want to talk about our personal experience in our family with the opioid issue. My wife, as many of you know, has had serious back issues for about 12 years. If it wasn't for opioids, I don't know that she'd be alive today. So before we throw the baby out with the bathwater, let's understand that it's the abuse of opioids and their derivatives, most of which are coming here illegally, that's driving the problem. And let's talk about that issue. And that's a law enforcement issue, and it's a crisis of the heart. Most of the citizens in Scott County are very self-sufficient. They walk the straight and narrow, and they live their lives to the best of their God-given abilities. There are those people, however, who are in addiction or some sort of a crisis, whether it's the mental health driving it or whether it's the drug abuse driving the mental health crisis. That, again, can be debated. But one of the things we've done is the 16 beds. We're working with the consortium with the hospital and several of the counseling groups on how we divert people. And at Scott County Court System, and I'll talk about this more in a minute, we've actually created a program to divert people in drug crisis into treatment and rehabilitation programs.
Mr. Wagner, how can Scott County help deal with the opioid abuse issue?
Again, it gets back to the whole education issues that come up. And I think working with the schools, getting the deputies actually into the school, talking with the counselors, it's a very frustrating thing, because when the whole meth epidemic started a few years ago, and it became public information as to how meth is actually manufactured and what the ingredients are, it absolutely boggles my mind that someone would actually use or attempt to use a product like this. And yet, I don't know, there's something falling through the cracks here, and it's very frustrating, but I suppose just more education on the issue. Thank you.
Can I use a rebuttal, but not exactly for a rebuttal? I think it's important that we expand on this point so you know what we've been doing as Scott County. You know, part of our state mandate is we run the court system. We build the court buildings, and we accommodate the things that the judicial system needs to do in Scott County. One of the things that judges Rex Stacy and Christian Wilton came to us a couple years ago and said, there's a magnificent program called a drug diversion program. We'd like to start a drug court in Scott County. So my fellow commissioners and I put up $900,000 over 3 years to help fund this. And the money that we spend, we more than save in incarceration and in people going back into the system. These are people who want to make a change in their lives. The judges recognize it. It's been an enormous success.
Candidates, many people who work in Scott County can't afford to live here. What do we need to do? Mr. Wagner, we'll begin with you.
The issue with livable wage jobs is it's an ongoing issue here in Scott, and especially Shakopee. We've got the Valley Green Industrial Park with, unfortunately, just in my opinion, way too many entry-level salary positions. And that's one of the things with the remaining land in the industrial park. I think the first and number one thing the city council needs to look at if they ask for any kind of increment financing or any help at all is to look at it, and it's livable wage jobs. And use the land in the industrial and the commercial with that in mind, because more entry-level jobs, it's such a drain on the infrastructure of everyone else in Scott County. Thank you.
Commissioner Beard, many people who work in Scott County can't afford to live here. What do we need to do?
There's been a remarkably successful program called 50 by 30 that's been going for several years now. It's sort of a shorthand for we want at least as many jobs as, half as many jobs as there are people that are working age in the county. We wanted to be at 50% of those jobs of the population by 2030. We're at 48% already. We're on our way to doing livable, good livable jobs for people in this county. However, some of the problem is outside of our control. The house that Karen and I built in Egan in 1979, it would be illegal to build that house today. We built it with our own hands. It cost us $41,000. You can't do that today thanks to the building codes and the cost of land and other things that are happening. So I think part of the reason is we need to stop committing government to help people save them from themselves for one issue. But the other issue that we have to deal with is that Scott County has very little to do with housing because we only have land use control in the townships. The cities actually control their own destinies in that regard.
Candidates, how adequate is our road system, and what should be the county's plan for helping everyone get from where they live to where they work? How adequate is our road system, and what should be the county's plan for helping everyone get from where they live to where they work? Commissioner Beard, we'll begin with you.
Oh, this is my favorite subject. I spent 12 years in the legislature dealing with road systems and transportation issues. The number one thing that touches every person's life in this county is the road system. The biggest part of our budget is health and human services. The next biggest part is transportation. We need to have a good, solid road system cooperating with our townships, our cities, and with MnDOT to make sure that our citizens are as mobile as they possibly can be. And transit wins when we have a great road system because transit uses the roads and bridges. Isn't that an amazing thing? So it is very key to what we do. It's one reason when I left the legislature, I made sure there was a little piece in state law that allowed Scott County to raise a 0.5% sales tax to spend on our own roads and bridges. Outside of the Met Council's purview, that was ours to spend. And I was happy to help lead the charge to raise that sales tax, which yields over $8 million a year to accelerate road and bridge construction projects all across Scott County.
Mr. Wagner, how adequate is our road system, and what should be the county's plan for helping everyone get from where they live to where they work?
The one thing that the Scott County is phenomenally good at over the years watching it is the transportation funding grants that they apply for with the state and federal government. They're just phenomenal at getting monies. I mean, at the last Tiger grant on the 16941 interchange there, I think they got, what, 10 million and then another 14 million for that. It's phenomenally good. And, it's just continue to work with what we have. It's difficult. I don't know if it's possible to actually build your way out of congestion, but you do the best you can with what you have. Thank you.
Candidate SCALE, the Scott County Association for Leadership and Efficiency, brings the county and its municipalities together to solve problems and make our resources work efficiently. How effective are these kinds of partnerships, and what should be our next steps in these partnerships? So how effective are partnerships like Scale, and what should be our next step in these partnerships? Mr. Wagner, we'll begin with you.
Well, I think that Scale is a great, anytime you get together with the local branches of government, whether it be the city, the townships, the county, sheriff's department, everyone is involved in the Scale initiative. And anytime you get all of the agencies together in one room and try to hash things out, the Scale, we've had Governor Dayton has been down a couple of times, and it works great, and just continue with what we're doing. We're doing a good job with it. Thank you.
Commissioner Beard, how effective are partnerships like Scale, and what should be our next steps in these partnerships?
When I served in St. Paul, I was amazed to find that not one of the other 87 counties had anything like Scale. Now, I'm a coffee and donuts guy. A lot of you know that. And so the idea that we'd all get together once a month on a Friday morning for coffee and donuts at Prior Lake City Hall is an amazing thing, not only because it builds relationships and keeps lines of communication open, but because it gives us opportunity to collaborate. I remember one of the first things we did was Shakopee needed a certain piece of equipment, Savage needed a piece of equipment, but they only needed it 3 months a year apiece. So we got together through the Scale concept and wrote the equipment exchange program so that we could economize with the taxpayer dollars and still accomplish city services that need to happen. Whether it's snowplow routes overlapping with city and state highway routes so that we plow snow better, or whether it's working on countywide ordinances so we're all on the same page. Scale's been a very successful model that's envied across the state, and I think the thing we got to watch is we keep it practical and we don't allow mission creep to take it into places that get a little sticky.
Candidates, our last question this evening is going to be, what is your vision for Scott County? What is your vision for Scott County? Commissioner Beard, we'll begin with you.
Well, folks, when I when I served in the legislature, one of the things I deeply admired about Scott County was its collegiality and its ability to get along and take care of itself. Scott County's strength is its people, the citizens that we serve as elected representatives. They're resourceful, they're resilient, they're mostly self-reliant. They don't demand a lot from government. So my vision is that the county, at least at the county level, we wouldn't commit more government than our citizens want, need, or want to pay for. Scott County is a well-run county. The step from the legislature to the county board was amazingly smooth and very rewarding personally, although this isn't about me, because I found it's a very well-run county with a good esprit de corps among the employees that work there. My vision is that we would continue that. We'd continue to be an example for the rest of the state on how we can cooperate to deliver necessary government services with a minimum of fuss and particularly with the minimum of taxpayer dollars.
Mr. Wagner, what is your vision for Scott County?
Simple. Just keep Scott County a great place to live, play, and call home.
Well, candidates, we are coming to the end of our time together this evening. Those of you in the audience, if you have not had your questions answered or asked this evening, the candidates will still be here after our debate this evening, or you can contact their campaign offices with your questions. Also, don't forget you can find out more about our candidates at the Shakopee Chamber's website, shakopee.org. Each candidate will now have 1 minute to make a closing statement, and Commissioner Beard, we will begin with you.
Well, again, I want to say thank you to the Chamber, to River Valley Church, and to Rob for the amazing job you've done over the years that I've participated in these candidate forums with all of you. In my 12 years in the legislature, I gained a varied and widely respected depth of experience, connections, and skill sets that I think I've been able to bring to my first term as a Scott County Commissioner. I think Scott County's projects, its particular needs, like with the health or the mental health facility, with building the 101 causeway across the valley so that we flood-proofed it. Little things like that that I've been able to do behind the scenes and out of the public eye on behalf of Scott County have been my strengths on the county board. I'd be honored on November 7th if you'd vote to send me back for one more 4-year term, because there's a few projects we have going that are not completed, like the 169 bridge restriping or the addition of additional lanes up to 494. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for support in the past. I look forward to it in the future.
Mr. Wagner, 60 seconds.
Thank you. And again, appreciate everyone for coming. It's a beautiful facility, like I said before. I'm a lifelong Scott County resident. I'm a private business owner here in Scott County, and I love living here. I love Scott County, and I would appreciate your vote in November. Thank you.
Well, as we close this part of our forum this evening, allow me to remind you that the views expressed in tonight's debate are those of the candidates and not those of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber sponsors this event as a service to the community and has gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure the objectivity of our forum this evening. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate. Instead, we seek to provide the businesses and voters of Shakopee with the information you need to make informed choices when you vote. Thank you to those of you who have been in the audience this evening. Thank you to our host, River Valley Church. And on behalf of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau, allow me to thank you, our candidates. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service to our community. Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. Please remember to vote. We'll now take a brief intermission as we prepare for our candidates for Minnesota House District 55A. Thank you and good night. Good evening and welcome to the 2018 Minnesota House District 55A Candidates Forum being sponsored by the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. We're gathered together this evening at River Valley Church's Shakopee campus. My name is Rob O'Neill. I am the pastor of Resonate Community Church and a member of the Chamber's Public Policy Committee. I'll serve as moderator for tonight's event. All the candidates for House District 55A were invited to participate. With us this evening are Mr. Eric Mortensen and Mr. Brad Tabke. Would you welcome our candidates, please? Candidates are arranged in alphabetical order. Candidates have already recorded interviews to introduce themselves to our community, and you can see those online, so our candidates will not be making opening statements this evening. I encourage you to watch their videos. Tonight, candidates will be asked a series of questions. They'll have 60 seconds to respond to each question. They will also have 4 opportunities to make rebuttal comments for 30 seconds. As moderator, I'm allowed to ask follow-up questions, in which case the candidates will be given 30 additional seconds to respond. Candidates, our first question this evening is, what should the state minimum wage be and why? What should the state minimum wage be and why? Mr. Mortensen, we'll begin with you.
Well, I want to thank the Chamber for organizing this event, first of all. And thank you all for coming. I'm a small business owner, and I feel as though I take care of my employees. That is my mantra is, I'm going to take care of them and trust that they take care of me. Just 2 weeks ago, I gave all of my employees a 10% raise. But when government starts artificially inflating the cost of something, anything, what happens is we get less of it. By increasing the minimum wage, we take the bottom rung off of the earnings ladder, thereby negatively affecting the same people that we intended to help. The low-skilled workers, people returning to the workforce, their job disappears when we increase the cost of employing those people.
Mr. Tabke, what should the state minimum wage be and why?
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Chamber for having us here, and it's been a haul tonight. This has been quite the night of a lot of really good conversation about where we're going in Shakopee and what's happening in our community. So thank you very much, everybody, for putting this on and for being here. And with regard to the minimum wage, I believe that the state of Minnesota is working in the right direction on minimum wage. We need to continue to ratchet up our minimum wage, but I do not believe that there should be one higher minimum wage for the entire state of Minnesota, because when you go into greater Minnesota, when you go into Shakopee, Minneapolis, St. Paul, there are very different needs that happen there in each community. And so we need to allow local control so that each of those communities is able to do what is best for their community, because I fully believe that the local choices are the best way to make choices for communities and the best way to get great results for the state of Minnesota.
Candidates, research shows that we have a persistent achievement gap for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Minnesota's future economic success depends on ensuring all Minnesota students graduate prepared for their next steps in life. What can the state do to close Minnesota's achievement gap? Mr. Tabke, we'll begin with you. What can the state do to close Minnesota's achievement gap?
Thank you. This question is really important to a lot of communities across the state of Minnesota, and especially in Shakopee. We have an achievement gap in Shakopee, and it's unconscionable to me that Minnesota as a state has the second best life for a family in the state of Minnesota, but we are also the second worst place for people of color in the state and the nation. And so it is really important that we stop just talking about this and stop putting lip service to this achievement gap issue and this great disparities and inequalities that are going on today in our state. And so in order to help fix that, we need to start educating kids earlier. We need to really invest as a state of Minnesota in pre-K. We need to get all kids the ability to have early education in whatever ways make sense for them. If that family chooses to have early education in an in-home daycare or in a center or in a public school, we need to make sure that those parents are allowed to make those decisions to have really good outcomes for their kids and be everybody starting on an even playing field.
Mr. Mortensen, what can the state do to close Minnesota's achievement gap?
Well, I agree. It is a shame that we have this achievement gap to begin with. And we've been throwing money at the problem for decades. That clearly hasn't worked. We need to actually be analyzing it and seeing what we can do differently. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of taking a tour of our Hy-Vee with Zach, the store manager. And I asked Zach, tell me about the leadership structure of Hy-Vee. And he said, it's beautiful. We have local control. Every store manages their own pricing, they manage their own inventory, they manage their own staff. He said what they found is it allows them to be the most nimble and the most responsive to every community they serve. That's what we should be doing with our schools, empowering them at the local level.
Candidates, do you support, yes, Mr. Tabke, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I have no idea what that had to do with the achievement gap, Mr. Mortensen. The achievement gap is something that is really important that we focus on as leaders in the state of Minnesota, and it is really critical that we push, and that, because even in Shakopee has more than 40% people of color in our community, and we are leaving people behind. We have a workforce that has to have everybody stepping up, and we need to have people who are well educated and who can fill the jobs of tomorrow, and it takes everybody working together to get there. So I very much believe that we must be focusing on the workforce of tomorrow, and that includes everyone coming up together.
Yes, Mr. Mortensen, 30 seconds to respond.
I believe in workforce development as well. In fact, I volunteer my time at Summit Academy. They take no government dollars, and they take youth, they give them a GED, they get them into the field, they get them into construction, they get these kids into IT fields. I've hired people out of Summit Academy. I volunteer my time there by helping them do mock interviews. So when they come in to an actual employer, they're better prepared to get that job and support themselves and their family.
Candidates, do you support legislation that would make mandatory the use of body cameras by law enforcement? Why or why not? And if so, how would you pay for the purchase of equipment and the other costs associated with that initiative? Mr. Mortensen, we'll begin with you. Do you support the legislation that would make mandatory the use of body cameras by law enforcement? Why or why not? And if you do, how would you pay for the purchase of the equipment and the other costs associated with the initiative?
Sure. So I went to school for law enforcement. I'm very sympathetic to law enforcement officers and the challenges that they've been going through, especially recently. Now, putting a body camera on every officer, I think it's something we should be looking at. I think there's some data storage, there's some cost implications, so I look forward to diving into that. But really, my mission in running is standing up to the political class. As I've walked the streets of town, and I've put 800 miles across our community and knocked on 5,000 doors, people are tired of the same career politicians that make the same promises to fix the same problems year after year after year. They're looking for something fresh, they're looking for something new, and that is fundamentally why I'm running for office. Because I too am tired of these same problems never getting any traction. As a former volunteer firefighter, firefighters run towards problems, not away from them, and I'm prepared to do so at the state capitol.
Mr. Tapke, do you support legislation that would make mandatory the use of body cameras by law enforcement? Why or why not? And if you do, how would you pay for the purchase of the equipment and other costs associated with the initiative?
Yes, thank you for this question, and I will actually answer this question. And with that, body cameras are really important for the future. While I was mayor of Shakopee from 2012 to 2016, and during that time, we explored and took a very measured approach to how we can utilize body cams that protect people's privacy, but also work to make sure to protect our police department and make sure that we have the right outcomes in our community as things are happening and as situations happen. And so with that, we implemented using body cams, and it has been a really successful program, and it's working really well. Again, I don't believe that the state of Minnesota should be preempting local decisions as to how body cams are used and implemented, but I think it's a really good thing for every single police department in the state of Minnesota to utilize. And we can do that through through having grants, which the state of Minnesota is already working on having more grants to allow police departments to invest in this really expensive technology.
Candidates in campaign mailers and social media. Yes, Mr. Mortensen.
Thank you. Everything you just heard there was the type of belittling political talk that everybody is so tired of hearing. Brad seems to think he has the answer to all that ails us, and everybody is so tired of that. There's nothing wrong with average citizens running for public service.
In campaign mailers and social media posts and videos, the two of you have struck starkly different perspectives when it comes to how you'd represent Shakopee in St. Paul. As we currently don't know which party will hold majority or the governorship, how will you collaborate with members from each party to pass legislation? This question will begin with Mr. Tapke. How will you collaborate with members from each party to pass legislation?
Thank you very much. I absolutely love this question. I'm really glad that this is being asked and in this really important forum that we've got here. Like I said, I was mayor, and that was a nonpartisan position. And so we worked really hard to maintain the nonpartisan aspect of that position. And so it gave us the ability to work with whomever, whenever people wanted to work together to get things done for our community. So having come from that background and really having those skills to connect people and to find ways to get good work done for our community, we worked together with Senator Eric Pratt. We worked on multiple bills at the state together to get those done. Party had nothing to do with it, as well as working with Democrats and working, like I said, working together to get those done. And that's what I want to do at the legislature, is to work for residents of 55A, Shakopee, Jackson Township, and Louisville Township. And I'm going to use a rebuttal on this one as well. I'm going to pre-rebut.
You're going to Let's let Mr. Mortensen speak,
yeah, I know.
and then you
I'm
can
just
rebut.
letting you know.
you're preloaded that you know that he's going to rebut
Right,
you now.
fair enough.
How will you collaborate with members from each party to pass legislation, Mr. Mortensen?
Sure. So I've long said since I decided to run for office that I reject this dichotomy of Republican versus Democrat that gets shoved down our throat. To me, that's not the real issue at hand. The real issue at hand is the political class and the political elitists against everybody else who just wants to be left alone. So when it comes to how to work across the aisle at the Capitol, I don't have an issue with that, as long as we're on the same mission, and that's getting government off our back, out of our pockets. The goal here is make Minnesota a destination for people and businesses to flock towards instead of flee from, which is what we have happening right now. In the last 3 years, I've watched 4 of my closest neighbors move not just out of Minnesota, not just out of Shakopee, but out of Minnesota. They've moved to low and no income tax states. So we need tax reform, we need tax cuts, and we need to choke out the regulations that have been choking small businesses.
Mr. Tabke, 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to reiterate in this campaign that we have, Mr. Mortensen and I have 2 very diametrically opposite ways of campaigning and working together with our community. If you, just take a simple 10 seconds and scroll through both of our Facebook pages, and everything that you see on there from our campaign has been 100% positive. Where are we going? What can we do together? We can't say the same for our opponent, and I really want people to take note of that because we've worked exceptionally hard to make sure to keep this upstanding and working hard for our community.
Candidates, how do you
Rebuttal
think
here?
that... Yes, Mr. Mortensen, 30 seconds.
I've long heard this message that I'm so negative, but I would default to the saying, don't blame the messenger. When Brad's message, or Brad's record rather, is so incredibly negative, we all remember how he ripped this town apart, how he told us one thing and turned around and did something else. Brad has been the single most divisive person in this community, and I hear it all over the place. So I would implore you to not forget about those facts.
Candidates, how do you think the state should deal with traffic congestion in the South Metro, specifically at the intersection of 169-13 and 101? Mr. Mortensen, we'll begin with you.
Sure, I've consistently said this is one of my top 3 initiatives. It could start something simple. Simply restriping the bridge is a short-term solution. MnDOT finished up, I think it was a 3-year study in April of this year that said there are some spot improvements. There's a Mint Pass option, as well as there's a bus rapid transit option. The shoulders have already been strengthened on 169, and the footings have already been poured to accommodate an additional lane. So that is what I will champion at the Capitol.
Mr. Tabke, how do you think the state should deal with traffic congestion in the South Metro, specifically at the intersection of 169-13 and 101?
Yes, I agree completely. Look at us agreeing completely together that 169 is one of the major issues that we've got in our community and going back and forth. So I firmly believe that there are a lot of different things that we can do and must do to help relieve that congestion. A lot of that is having and growing jobs here in our community so people can live and work here in Shakopee. A lot of that is having affordable housing that people can live and work here in our community, as well as improvements to the 169 corridor through that area. So as Mr. Mortensen mentioned, there are a lot of really great plans that I believe have to be funded for bus rapid transit that would go from Marsh Road Transit Station up to 55 and then down into Minneapolis. And worked really hard to get the 495 bus in Shakopee, which is a precursor to using mass transit and getting that working so that we can reduce congestion on the road and give everybody options as to how they can go.
Candidates, what should the legislature do to control or reduce the price of health insurance? Mr. Mortensen, we'll begin with you.
Well, this is another one of my top 3 things I've been talking to people about. And ever since the Democrats gave us Obamacare 10 years ago, or as they called it, the Affordable Care Act, ironically, even our Governor Mark Dayton has said the Affordable Care Act is no longer affordable. And that's because it went halfway to the point of being a government-controlled program. So what I've been advocating for is an Obamacare opt-out plan, where Minnesota can exert our 10th Amendment rights, empowering consumers to be able to make choices by injecting competition into our healthcare market. Brad is going to say that a one-size-fits-all government plan is the solution. He's going to say that Obamacare didn't go far enough. We need to go all the way and just give the state complete control over our healthcare system.
Mr. Tapke, what should the legislature do to control or reduce the price of health insurance?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a huge, huge issue, especially for seniors that I talk to throughout our community. Healthcare is way, way too expensive for people to be able to utilize and get the care that they need and that they deserve as Minnesotans and as Americans. It is really important that we address healthcare. And so, contrary to what Mr. Mortensen was talking about here, I very much believe in a plan that was put together last session, and it didn't go very far, but it was for taking Minnesota Care, which is a really great program here in the state of Minnesota, and allow people to opt into that program if they choose. Keep your own private health care, because that works really well for some people, and use that health care as you go, but also have options for people where it is too expensive and they have the ability to purchase into a state plan for health care with Minnesota Care.
Candidates, our nation has seen many high-profile incidents of gun violence. What needs to be done in response and to prevent future incidents? Mr. Tabke.
This is also something that both Mr. Mortensen and I hear a lot about on the doors when we talk to people. People are rightfully concerned about gun violence in their schools, in their communities, and making sure that we are safe. It is really important. I don't think the answer is to eliminate guns entirely. I don't think that makes any sense whatsoever, or to eliminate hunting in the state of Minnesota, as my opponent said that I wanted to do. And it is just not a pragmatic solution whatsoever to move forward with those kinds of things. It is really important, though, that we have smart changes that happen for making sure that we're doing background checks to make sure that everybody who has a gun is someone who is not going to go in and to shoot up a school. I obviously have kids in the school. My wife teaches. It's really important that we have those things. And so there are eliminating bump stocks, making sure that we have background checks done, and probably come back.
Mr. Mortensen, what needs to be done in response to gun violence?
Well, no one wants anybody to be gunned down in the streets. I have kids in the school as well. I hold their lives more dearly than I hold my own. But our Second Amendment is clear. We will keep the right to bear arms, and that shall not be infringed. Brad says he has common sense gun control that he would recommend. But when you look at the litany of gun control that he supports on his website, there's nothing left off the table. So I stand firm that the Second Amendment shall not be infringed.
Mr. Tabke, 30 seconds.
One thing that I am absolutely against, just so everyone is clear, is that stand your ground laws are a really, really bad thing for the state of Minnesota and for people, which allow someone to shoot and injure another person if they feel threatened. And it is been enacted in multiple states throughout the country, and it has had disastrous results, and it is something that we cannot and should not do in the state of Minnesota.
Well, our time is running out. Anyone whose questions have not been answered this evening, and there are plenty more questions that we could ask, should take the opportunity tonight, as our candidates are here, to ask them after our forum, or you can contact our campaign offices. Also, don't forget you can find out more about all of our candidates for all of our races this evening at the Chamber's website, shakopee.org. Each candidate will now have 1 minute to make closing statements, and we'll begin with Mr. Mortensen.
Well, thank you again for coming out tonight. This election is about choice. And as Brad has mentioned several times, the differences between him and I couldn't be any bigger. On taxes, I want to lower them. Brad wants to raise them. On healthcare, I want to empower you as a consumer with choices by putting competition into the marketplace. On immigration, I want to actually enforce immigration laws, Brad wants to follow California's lead and make Minnesota a sanctuary state. On the school board removal bill, I've been leading that effort for the last year, while for the last 2 years, Brad has been saying anybody who advocates for a school board removal bill is simply looking for chaos. While Brad requires you to put your faith in government, I put my faith in you.
Mr. Tabke, 60 seconds. Closing
Thank you.
statement.
Thank you very much, again, everyone, for being here today. This is a great thing. I want to thank my family, my wife, my 2 daughters, who are being amazing throughout this entire campaign. It is great to have family, friends who are all supporting us and helping this move forward. And so I really, really appreciate everyone's help. And this is a really obviously important moment for Shakopee. Both Eric and I love Shakopee, love the state of Minnesota, but we have 2 very different ways that this could move forward. I encourage everyone to go to our website, tabkeformn.com, because there we have the facts laid out, and not as Mr. Mortensen continues to talk about them, where we really want to work together to get things done. We have, as everyone can see, through 4 years of working for the city of Shakopee, what I have done and what we can do together. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful night.
Well, as we close this evening, please remember that the views expressed in tonight's debate are those of the candidates, not those of the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber sponsors this event as a service to our community and has gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure the objectivity of our forum. The candidate does not endorse, or the Chamber doesn't endorse. The candidate does not have to endorse the Chamber. You guys do know that. And so we return the favor to you. We do not endorse a candidate. Instead, we seek to provide the businesses and the voters of Shakopee with the information you need to make informed choices when you vote. Thank you, audience members, for your participation this evening. Thank you, River Valley Church, for everything that you did to host us tonight. And on behalf of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau, we thank our candidates. We appreciate your time this evening. We appreciate your service to our community. Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. Please remember to vote. Thank you, and good night.